This is Papa Smurf. You're listening to Our Lifestyle, the podcast, with ODB and the mayor.
Yo, it's Our Lifestyle, the podcast, episode 150. Yes, the milestone episode 150. Thanks to everyone that's been listening for a very long time, whether you've been with us since the beginning, episode 1, or you've came on as of late. We certainly appreciate you guys. If you are a new listener and you came here to check out Steve Nielsen's audio from the famed Alter Images and or CanDo, do yourself a favor, please either subscribe or follow the podcast however you found this episode, and go back and listen to previous episodes, whether you're on Apple Podcasts app or you can even download Podbean, whether you're on iPhone or Android, and you can go back to the beginning. That's who hosts our podcast. But again, there's many ways, many of you know, that you can go back and listen. So episode 150, we've got Steve Nielsen. Steve has been around mini trucking a long time. You'll hear his story. It goes back to kind of the early to mid 80s, and there's a lot to talk about. So it was a trip down memory lane. You know, Steve and I hadn't talked on the phone in a long time. I met him back in the late 90s looking at ads and mini trucking, needing to purchase parts. Ended up doing business with him, and you know, obviously he's had a kind of a storied career, if you will, from a mini trucking standpoint. So we'll talk all about that, and that's going to be coming up here a little bit later in the podcast. Now, I'll do this intro, and, you know, Mike and I, we can't always sync up during the week, but Miggity Mike the Mayor sends a big shout-out to the Airhead Nation and all the listeners. He is really been hustling with his personal business and his day job. And, of course, he's getting ready for After Dark 2020, so he's got a full plate, so to speak. So shout out to Miggity Mike, the mayor, the co-host. So just want to also remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Bayou Showdown 2019, which is sponsored by Sparkles Detail. So Bayou Showdown, Sparkles Detail, big shout out. This show is November 15th through the 17th, 2019 at the Harbor Center in Slidell, Louisiana. You can search Bayou Showdown on Facebook or follow Bayou Showdown Show on Instagram for more information. There's going to be a ton of awesome awards. We all know that we don't go to shows just for awards, but it's kind of the icing on the cake for all these badass vehicles that are going to be out there. So again, 2 weekends before Thanksgiving, so you got plenty of time to go out, have a great time, and then, you know, don't conflict too much with that vital time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is a Custom Car Show Productions event, also known as CCSP, so shout out to our title sponsor, Bayou Showdown and Sparkles Detail. Okay, so episode 150, as I mentioned, we have Steve Nielsen, and so we'll get into that here, and then we'll start off with the last episode. So episode 149, that was a mini truckin' motherfucking Monday, and it featured Jeremy and Jared. So what we ended up doing was kind of a little bit of a mix, right? Trying to keep the podcast fresh. 2 homies I had met over at Sicknick 2019 back in August. And what we did was kind of that double interview, so to speak. So we went back and forth, kind of like an old school hip-hop track. And, you know, we bounced back and forth between Jeremy and his story with the Integra and now the Rodeo. And then, of course, Jared with the badass Nissan hardbody that he is in the stages of rebuilding. Now, we posted their vehicles plenty of times on social media. Go out there. I encourage you to follow them and learn a little bit more about the homies. Now, Jeremy, we did kind of, joke around there, kind of hint at an upcoming feature. You know, I think it was just on episode 148 that Mike and I had found some intel on on StraightTrucks.com, and it had hinted that the rodeo feature was coming, and it sure enough it did. So it did come out. It is in print now for November of 2019, and it just so happens that his Integra feature was December of 99 in Mini Truck, and so literally almost 20 years to the month, he has another really cool vehicle featured in print magazine. So big ups to the homie. I think it's been just over 2 years on the run with the rodeo, and it looks damn good. So again, thanks for everyone that tuned in. If you're a new listener, go back, listen to the last few episodes. You'll be thoroughly surprised of the content that we're covering, especially related to the mini truck scene. As we always preach, this is a mini truck and inspired podcast, but as mini truckers, of course, we like a lot of different things, whether it's crazy paint, big wheels, airbags. Of course, hip-hop played a big role, I think, in kind of the whole mini trucking movement. So we talk a lot about a lot of topics. And speaking of topics, I wanted to give a shout-out to Ruben, Ruben Artiaga. So thanks. He gave us a great shout-out, as he always does every week the other day, and he kind of reinforced that, hey, we've been talking about, especially on Mini Truck on Monday, where we kind of split up some of the topics. We're talking about tech a little bit, retro gaming, so on and so forth. So we're trying to keep it fresh and not talk about one particular topic, and I think you guys will appreciate we've been doing that for some time now. All right, next out, we got the general updates. This is brought to you by our friends over at HammerDWeekendWear. Visit HammerDWeekendWear.com and pick up some awesome clothing related to the mini truck, full-size, and custom car scene in general. Their clothing line features real builds, #real builds. And speaking of Hammered Weekend Wear and Riggedy Ron Perkins and Hank, Mike and I ended up getting a couple packages this week. So we now have our hands on Return of the Titan. Love that t-shirt. We also ended up purchasing some hoodies. So remember, hoodies are available typically through like a pre-sale, but visit HammerDWeekendWear.com. Whether you're looking for Return of the Titan, which is one of the newer shirts, or Speed Skatin, they have a lot of really good sizes available. And don't forget to pick up some of the new stickers that feature the new kind of refreshed logo for Hammered Weekend Wear. There's one that matches the Return of the Titan as well as Speed Skating. So shout out to the homie. All right. So general updates. Mike and I just usually kind of cover things that we've got going on, not always related to the mini truck scene. And my one update is Project Smuggler's Blues. You can check the hashtag. You can also tap on any hashtag, including like our lifestyle podcast or Minis on the Rise hashtag. But Project Smuggler's Blues, that is my project, 1964 Lincoln Continental. And we have been really making a lot of progress. I mentioned, I think, a couple of episodes ago, Tony Boss Boland's really been helping out. We basically had this motor rebuild in the process for about a year. And, his father, as well as Tony, really helped kind of pull this whole thing together. And the last thing was to drop it in. Before we dropped in the motor, which is really not that hard of a thing if you've ever kind of taken a motor out or put one back in, especially in an older car, there's a lot more room. What Tony had suggested was, he goes, yo, Jay, 100% true. You got to rebuild the steering column in these Lincolns. If you've ever listened to my Lincoln Attic podcast, we actually had a topic with John Lyman from up in Pittsburgh, and these are the only cars that I know of, whether it be Ford, Lincoln, or whatnot, where the steering column ends up where it can literally just go into gear. So, typically it'll fall into reverse. And for whatever reason, basically the steering column has to be rebuilt. And the challenge is like, a lot of us, especially at car shows, you start your car and you let it warm up, and you're like, all right, I'm going to go talk to the homies real quick. Everybody's getting ready to leave for the show or leave the show, and you leave your car idling. Well, it's like literally the worst thing you can do in a 60s Lincoln. And that's because the steering column, you have to rebuild towards the end of it. You have to put like a coupler type deal. And then you also have to change one of the key bushings for the shift linkage, and either one of those can cause the car, basically a lot of issues. And we've seen it time and time again. We actually just saw it recently with a beautiful, I think it was a 63. This guy had it at a shop, and boom, it went into gear, and it caused so much havoc. So, word to the wise, if you've ever thought about, or one day you end up buying a 60s or a Lincoln, do not ever let that thing idle unless you've got the foot on the brake. We've even had people that have had stories where they're at a stoplight, and they're just sitting there, they're idling, the foot's on the brake, of course, and then boom, it shifts gears. So it's just not a good thing, but you got to rebuild the column, which we did. You could, of course, go aftermarket. We've seen some guys go with, some of the higher end. But if you want to keep the car kind of original, you rebuild it. It takes a little bit of time, and there you go. So more on that. If you like Lincoln 60 era Lincolns, whether you own one, you want to one day, just check out Lincoln Attic Podcast. I'll talk more about that kind of stuff. So long story short, just really trying to get that car back running and driving again. It's been a little bit of time since it's been off the road, but I've been making all the necessary updates, as I kind of just mentioned. So more to come here in the next few weeks, hopefully. All right, next we got the podcast updates brought to you by our friends over at the West Coast Influence. If you love mini trucking as much as I do or we do at the podcast, check out minitruckfilm.com. They do have select shirts still available in various sizes. They also have that famous Blu-ray and DVD. Hell, even if you don't go out there to buy something, if you just hit minitruckfilm.com, there's a link right there on the homepage to hit play, and that will take you right to the YouTube video, which is kind of like the preview, and it's about 3.5 minutes. Check it out. It's some old footage, and they did a damn good job. Big ups to Radar Hendricks for what he continues to do for the mini truck scene. All right, so as I mentioned, I think recently we have iHeartRadio now approved. So if you're an iHeartRadio app user, you can find our Lifestyle the Podcast there. If you are going to be at SlamFest and you want to pick up an order, feel free to go to ourlifestylepodcast.com or click the link sometimes in our Instagram bio. I think right now we have it linked over to a podcast episode, but use the code SlamFestNoShip. And that code will allow for you to check out online and not pay shipping. We'll bring your order to SlamFest and we'll hand that over to you. Make it very simple. We also will accept cards at the show. If you're looking to buy one of our new hats, t-shirts, stickers, you name it, we'll take care of you. And then the next podcast update episode, which will be next Friday, that's going to feature NR Brad. So it's pretty simple. I would suggest you go out there and follow the homie. He's got a very cool story, a truck that he's owned a long time. And it's just NR_Brad. Of course, he's repping No Regrets. Got some good family photos on there as well. But of course, he has some awesome mini truck photos. You do have to request access to his profile. It's not a public profile. But trust me, it's worth it. He's got a truck with some cool changes coming up, but we'll wait for that audio next week. Next, we have the Airhead Nation updates. This is brought to you by our friends over at Colorado Custom Wheels, also known as CC Cycle Wheels. Follow CC Cycle Wheels on Instagram for more information. There's no one that's building badder billet wheels than CC Cycle Wheels, in my opinion. Okay, so this one's the first chance of getting to really, mention this. But back in a couple weeks ago, let's see, it was about almost 10 days ago, Dale Hughes had posted on Facebook, and I wanted to give a huge shout out to the homie, man. He's a huge supporter of the podcast. He always buys gear. He's up in Canada. When he came down to Florida, he visited. Just a super awesome guy. And he had posted that he needed prayers sent his mom's way. I won't read the whole post. It wasn't very long, but he did say it's not often that he posts personal stuff, but he needed as much love and prayers and positivity towards his mom. She had a really bad stroke on Sunday night. So I want to send some love out to Dale and his mom. I hope that things work out. I know that's a tough time or a tough challenge to kind of really deal with, but thanks for all your support, but, Airhead Nation, send out some good vibes over to Dale Hughes and his mom, Duke. So I know, that's a tough thing. So if you have, something that you think we should touch upon or an awesome story, you can email us at ourlifestylepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to kind of cover some of those during the Airhead Nation updates. All right, next, this is one of my favorite topics here, the scene updates. And the scene updates are brought to you by Sparkles Detail. You can visit sparklesdetail.com or have the clean team that supports the scene clean your ride at one of these shows nationwide. Visit the Sparkles Detail booth for more information. Of course, Custom Car Show Productions as well, which includes Orange Beach Invasion, Scraping the Coast, Sicknick, and Bayou Showdown, which you heard about earlier. So, first and foremost, Sean Mahaney, we just passed the anniversary of his death 2 years ago, and want to send good vibes out to his family, his friends, all the people that were close to him and knew Sean. A lot of good tribute posts the other day, a lot of positive comments about, man, he helped me for a bag of chips, or man, I bought the homie a pizza one night and he helped me out. Dude was willing to give his the shirt off his back, and it's such an honor that we had him on before his passing, because, dude, the guy was truly a stand-up dude. So it's very unfortunate, but if you guys have listened in the past, you guys know that we talked a lot about it, and rest in peace, Sean Mahaney. All right, speaking of rest in peace, Jesse Combs, there was a tribute. I'm sure many of you that enjoy the automotive industry as much as we do, whether it mini trucks, old school, new school, so on and so forth, you probably have seen the posts over the weekend, but the Peterson Museum, which I've never been to, they hosted, or I think they're still hosting this tribute. And one of the posts that I saw here was, this was from Kimmer, A Blonde Griff. And she says, this weekend has been full of emotions. The Jesse Combs is an amazing person, and everyone can see some of her work and fabrication at the Peterson Museum. It was until the 25th of September. Please also follow her foundation, the Jesse Combs Foundation, on Instagram to help the world learn more about her and what she's done in so many fields. But again, whether you follow her significant other, which was Terry Madden, Madden, you'll also see that he made quick work to kind of put this all together. So salute to him. Back on September 18th, he mentioned he was excited to announce the foundation website is live. It's thejessecombsfoundation.com. So check it out. Show some love if you can. And, he continues to spread the, much of the joy that she brought to the world and, of course, to him. So rest in peace, Jesse Combs. All right, to a lighter topic, Rickety Ron Perkins over at HammerDWeekendWear, he ended up landing himself a new ride, so really stoked for the homie. We're going to talk to him next week about some updates, but if you haven't, follow Ron Perkins on Facebook. He has a lot of funny posts, a lot of cool stuff going on, and he also has a new Ram truck, and new to him, really, really well-built truck. And, Ron, all I got to say is, man, bought, not built, dude. I mean, how could you do that? Just kidding, man. Love it. Love when people can take over someone else's passion, or someone, decides they want to do something different and they're willing to sell their badass vehicle and someone take it and kind of be the curator of it. So, Ron Perkins, HammerDWeekendWear, give him some love on Instagram. Or if you go to Instagram, you'll see a picture of the truck there, kind of a rear three-quarter shot. Love the RA logo on it. Looks really, really good. So, in the last couple episodes, I did mention the new Custom Trucks mag. And this is a really good magazine. Mike and I joked about it. I can't read it because I don't know how to read in Japanese. But there was some pretty cool rides in here. And this is a mini truck issue. And you might be thinking, well, a lot of their stuff is mini trucks. They do have full sizes in here, There's actually a Tahoe in here that is just amazing shoot by Brian over at Grinder TV. But they really talk about a lot of mini trucking in here, and they show the different OEMs and the different vehicles and trucks that they produced over the years, including like the Nissan Datsun truck, D12, the double cab, the long body with the different beds and stuff. So if you're a mini truck fan, try to get your hands on this. Mine came from Redbeard Clothing, and the homie, for a really reasonable price, will ship you a copy. But Suicidal Toy, Double Take, so on and so forth. So many different badass vehicles. Even the Forbidden 4Runner, which was shot at Relaxin in the Northwest, The Awakening. And believe it or not, I got to ride in this thing at that show. Juan Trevino shot it, so it looks damn good. What I wanted to call out was on pages 22 and 23, you have U.S. Truck and Car Show Top 9. Okay? So 9 is not an even number. And what Mike and I had talked about, not recording, when we weren't recording, was you got several shows on here. Lone Star Throwdown, Forbidden, Good Guys Del Mar Nationals, Southeast Mini Truckin' Nationals, Cruise to the Pines, Scraping the Coast, Relaxin' in the Northwest, which I just mentioned, The Awakening, Slamboree, and then Severed in the Southwest. We're proud at Our Lifestyle, the podcast, to say that we're partnered with at least 50% of these shows, right? So half of these, they're rolling with Team OLP, and we appreciate that. From Lone Star Throwdown to Southeast Mini Truckin' Nats, Scraping the Coast, Relaxin' in the Northwest, we certainly appreciate, everyone kind of sticking with us. And then, oh, by the way, Forbidden Fantasy. We love Brian and the whole FFFF crew. I think there's 4 Fs, right? Nah, just kidding. The whole Forbidden Fantasy crew. And then Severed in the Southwest, man. That right there is the Severed family, and they're great people. They had us out there in 2013, and we really appreciated it. So if you get a chance in December, check out Severed in the Southwest. Good people, one-day show. Severed Joe, who we've had on before, he was on C10 Talk recently. He kind of talked about some of the changes to rejuvenate the show, right? It really was never lacking, but it's like, hey, I think Joe said it's time. So they got a new venue, and they got a lot more information out there. But we will, of course, also talk a little bit about that show later this year. Okay, mini truck news and topics. They have different truck clubs that they highlight in here, so very, very cool. And shout out to the homie Matt Thompson. He's got his beautiful yellow Mazda that was also featured on our River Run shirt. That makes an appearance in that section. So great issue there. So wanted to give a huge shout out to this awesome publication. Now, speaking of publications, want to also reinforce that we'll do a flip through very soon of the new All-Time Low magazine. Please visit atlmagazine.com and order an issue. If you don't trust us, order one, check it out. You'll be thoroughly surprised. Now, the key to ordering the subscription is if they sell out of the individual issues, you're going to be ticked off because you can't get your hands on it. So if you go to atlmagazine.com, which now has a new landing page, you can go to magazines, and then biggity boom, you got issue 20, which is number 4 of 6 of 2019. You got the 2019 subscription as well. You can even check out with Apple Pay. So love it. Love the recent touches and updates to the website. They also have banners and stickers, so check them out. And then our last discussion here related to magazines is the new Street Trucks, which is November of 2019. So we'll kind of go through this one a little bit more on next episode, on the next week's episode. But what I will tell you is it's another great issue. Love the Phil Built Street Trucks Awards. That's on page 42. So shout out to Phil Built. Follow him on Instagram. He does some really awesome stuff, especially for Lone Star Throwdown. And then you have Jeremy's Badass Rodeo in here, right? You cannot go wrong with a mini truck. Oh, by the way, love it that it's blue. You have that on page 85. And it was shot by John Hansen, the great. It was titled Lodeo. Looks damn good. All right, next we have many of you, again, kind of custom car scene culture folks. You saw the tragic news. Owner of the most famous lowrider in Los Angeles. This video is titled Dies at the Age of 45, and that was Jesse Valdez, and he owned Gypsy Rose. So you probably have been sleeping under a rock if you didn't see some of the different tributes out there and whatnot to someone that was, regarded as having one of the baddest cars ever built from a lowrider standpoint. And one of the posts that stood out to me was from Grade, Grade 8, number 8, Fabrication on Instagram. The homie's a big supporter. And he says, and just like that, within the blink of an eye, another one is lost. Whatever you want to do in life, you better do it today because there may not be a tomorrow. And then he's got various hashtags in there. But rest in peace, Jesse Valdez, I believe I'm saying his name correct, Jr. He was born June 16, 1974, according to the meme that he posted, and he passed on September 17th, 2019. He was an unbelievable person from what his friends say, and he definitely had a very iconic car. Man, we never even really touched upon the fact that during the Cars at the Capitol, which was back in April, I think from April 12th to May, early May, that Gypsy Rose was there like in that glass container. So we'll have to talk a little bit about that. But, from a lowrider standpoint or a custom car culture person, big ups and rest in peace. Salute, Jesse Valdez. Okay, Relaxin' in the Northwest, The Awakening. They had a really cool post on their Facebook page, and they were asking for feedback, input from a current, maybe 2019, or a past Relaxin' in the Northwest, The Awakening photo that they can use for their new profile pic. And man, there were a lot of good ones submitted. A couple people even used the photos I took, and I was honored because I took a couple there that really, stood out to me. But I can tell you, man, that show is off the hook. You got to get ready for Relaxin' in the Northwest, which is called The Awakening. Follow Relaxin' in the NW for more information on Facebook or Instagram. And then congrats to Severed Australia. They just held Severed Slam. We posted some of that artwork. What was really cool was, helping with the Severed Ties page, get a chance to really post a lot of awesome stuff. And Toasty, who we've had on before, we posted that up. And then we, of course, also kind of cross-pollinated the post, and we posted it on the podcast page. And it's really an honor because there's a lot of guys in the club that do a lot. And someone like Toasty, I know he plays a major role in Severed Slam. The artwork was amazing. Now, when I originally posted it, I always try to give credit where credit's due. And he had hit me up, and he goes, yo, homie, man, you got to update the post. And I said, okay, what did I do, right? So I'll be the first to admit if I make a mistake or, hey, got to do better next time. But the Severed Slam 2 artwork that we posted about a week ago that I hashtagged Severed Ties Oz Crew, which is Severed Ties down there in Australia, their kind of chapter, if you will. And I wanted to make sure I gave a credit to Surface Nick because I was corrected that Surface Nick on Instagram, he did the artwork, so we did update that, not just on Instagram, but also on Facebook to kind of really reinforce that, hey, that was the artist. And then Toasty did the some of the show artwork itself, I think, where he took the time circuit looking deal and he combined that with Severed Slam and some of that Back to the Future epic kind of background. So big ups to the homies down there, man. Mini trucking is worldwide, as many of us know, and it's great to know that the Severed brothers and sisters down there are holding it down. So big ups to Toasty and the entire crew. All right, and then CC Cycle Wheels, they are back, okay? I mentioned recently that CC Cycle Wheels on Instagram had been compromised to some point, and Michael and team were fighting to get their account back. They were at 12,000, just a hair over 12,000 when they were hacked, so to speak. So whether you're following CC Cycle Wheels on Instagram, definitely appreciate you doing that. If you're not, please go out there and follow them. I think they're going to keep Colorado Custom official. Maybe it's kind of their official backup. Like you'll sometimes see that from different accounts. But go out there, follow CC Cycle Wheels. They're doing some big stuff, and we appreciate I'll have a couple of key updates here in the coming months from CC Cycle Wheels that tie into one of my projects. Okay, what's hot on social media, brought to you by our friends at GarageGearClothing.com. We love GarageGearClothing.com, and we know you will as well. Visit their website and get ready for the holidays, birthdays, you name it. Whether you're looking for some pink-colored material, maybe for the chicas, or something a little bit different for the homies, right? And those significant others. Get out there. They have youth sizes. Prices starting at $15. When you go under shop, you got shirts, hats, women's, youth, accessories, you name it. Let them know that our Lifestyle the Podcast sent you. You never know what they may throw in to that package for you. So this whack, I'll call him whack, right? I'm still using that word. I think I'm the only person. This whack young rapper, I won't even say this guy's name, has apparently, you guys have seen the memes, he's been snitching on everybody, dude. Like, literally. So, word to the wise, don't be a snitch. There's a link out here. If you go to pitchfork.com, this is the article that I'll kind of touch upon briefly because it's really not worth the time. Dude, you just look at this guy and you just go, man, this guy's a clown. I don't know, man. I just can't see past the fact dude is a clown, literally, with the different hair color. And I'm not trying to knock on people with different color hair and all that. I mean, dude, the guy is a straight up clown, okay? And this article kind of goes on to touch upon the fact that he, I think, is facing racketeering charges, right? So it says, as part of his plea bargain, yes, copping out, won't even say the rapper's name, agreed to become a witness for the prosecution in the government's racketeering and firearms cases against two men, Anthony Harv Ellison and this other guy with the nickname Nuke, alleged members of the 9 Trey Bloods gang. So it kind of goes on, and one thing I wanted to point out here that I had saved in my notes was this guy is going up in a federal courthouse today, tweeted another rapper. Message of the day, don't be an internet gangsta, be yourself. Snoop Dogg took to Instagram to call this guy a straight-up snitch. Vince Staples also weighed in, and he said, did this guy tell you? He tweeted, find out next time on Dragon Ball Z. So, I mean, dude, whatever happens to this guy, I think this guy is totally buried. I know Snoop has taken a couple shots at calling this guy a straight snitch by even saying this week that Martha Stewart didn't even snitch out. So it's just insane. The internet typically always wins with these different memes and things like that. And whether you're a fan of this guy or not, I mean, I'm proud to say that I've never knowingly listened to one of his songs. Like, if you played a song, I wouldn't know it was this guy, because I'm hoping I could say I've never even heard this guy's voice. I mean, I'm just a pretty good judge of character, and when I see someone like this, I go, dude, I just can't mess with it. So I'll just leave it at that. So that's really what's hot on social media. There's a lot of funny memes out there, but dude, straight clown, can't get down with it. Okay, so we are now to the show schedule. And I mentioned All Time Low magazine earlier. Visit atlmagazine.com. Let them know that our Lifestyle, the podcast, sent you. But there's also another reason to visit. Not only do they have magazines, they also have apparel, and they do have a new shirt, right? It's called Photographer Dedication. It's only $20, and it looks a lot like Damian Davis, who is a friend of ours to the podcast. So big ups. Love the different color options available. Really like the blue. I'm going to have to get me one of those. And if I remember correctly, a guy named Tony at Asphalt Army, he actually helped put that together, of course. So, you know, he's very talented, and big ups to the homie. He's a huge supporter of the podcast, and we thank him. Asphalt Army, big ups. But we got Slam Fest, which is October 12th and 13th. Bayou Showdown, which is 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, which you guys heard earlier. Mini Truck Showdown, which is February 13th through the 16th. That's the weekend before Lone Star Throwdown. Lone Star Throwdown is February 21st to the 23rd there in Conroe, Texas. Orange Beach Invasion, which is March 13th through the 15th there in Orange Beach, Alabama. Mini Truckin' Nats, which is April 24th through the 26th. And then Relaxin' in the Northwest, The Awakening, July 23rd through the 26th. So if you'd like to advertise your show with us, hit up Mike or email ourlifestylepodcast@gmail.com. We've got packages starting at very fair rates, and we will do our best to come out as well. Now, like we tell everyone, like when I was at Relaxin' in the Northwest, The Awakening, we don't always go to shows to sell merchandise. We're there from a media standpoint. We love to highlight the show, and we bring something that a lot of folks, I think, are realizing that's important for a show is you want to have a great brand, but we also do a lot of video on site and a lot of photos. Our goal is to drive impressions of that show and reinforce how awesome it is. And we only mess with shows that are awesome, right? So when you talk about a show to me like Scraping the Coast or Bayou Showdown or Relaxin' in the Northwest, The Awakening, and so many others that we've talked about, that we've highlighted, just know that if we're going to that show, it's already top-notch, and we appreciate the show promoters, the scene getting behind us, and if we can, we will bring merchandise. We appreciate when you guys, kind of link up with us and cop some of the new gear. So, big ups. I also want to talk just for a moment about Felt Ham Fabrications. So, if you go to Instagram and you type in FELTFAM_fab, you'll see there that his followers have grown, and the homie's doing some really cool stuff. Whether it be air tanks, it be various cups, hoods, the motorcycle tanks, so on and so forth. I mean, dude, Bayou Showdown, he has this amazing award that is a wire wheel, and it's all custom painted, and it's the best lowrider. So, Sean Randall and Greg Miller, they're really doing some cool stuff with their shows, and I'm glad that they've teamed up. Kind of that Stoop and Dre, that Kobe and Shaq deal, and they're really good people. So, whether you're going to go to Bayou Showdown this year and you're going to win an award, or you're just looking out for the homies in the podcast, get out there, support the scene. We appreciate you. But Felt Ham Fab, Jay, keep doing what you're doing. Doing some really awesome work. You're putting the time in. I don't know how often you sleep, if you sleep at all, but big ups, dude. So, with that being said, we're going to roll into this audio now. The audio with Steve it comes in at about an hour and a half, okay? And it's pretty intense because Steve did have a lot to say. I think that I was able to kind of conjure up some awesome memories that he had. And, there were some things like, it was kind of getting late that night, and I'm going, are you kidding me? No way. And, he did touch a little bit about, some of the stories. I had brought up some things about like when Bob Grant was partnered with them and the whole, the whole craziness. And Bob talked about the story when he was exhausted. I think he had like toothpicks in his eyes almost, right? Like the old cartoons. And thank God he wasn't injured when he went off, in the truck that he had built. And it's just, there's a lot there, right? So it was really cool. We've been talking to Steve for a long time about coming on, and now we have the audio done. So check him out. I don't want to give out all of his information yet. You'll hear it at the end of the interview. But, look him up sometime, man. You guys, especially kind of the newer mini truckers, you may not remember Alter Images or CanDo, but he did play a big role. If you look back at the Mini Truckin' Mags ads, you'll see it in there. And shout out, man, whether you love or hate Steve, he had kind of that flag in the ground, and he has his his past to really share, because he did a lot for the mini truck scene, in my opinion. And he had a couple of really nice builds. He had the epic 2-car trailer, not side-by-side either. We're talking double stack, some crazy stuff. So we'll share some of those photos. Big ups to Steve Nielsen. And thank you. If you came here to listen for the first time, make sure you subscribe. If you've been listening, we appreciate y'all. Big D Mike the Mayor and I will be back next week and bringing you guys some more intel. So thank you guys. Leave us a rating on iTunes if you can. We appreciate you. ODB, we out you. Kick it! Yo, and as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we've got Steve Nielsen on, and many of you will remember his name from many years of mini trucking. And Steve, I just wanted to welcome you to our Lifestyle, the podcast.
Thanks, man. I totally appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Hey, man, it was awesome to sit down with you. It's funny, a little over 20 years ago, I got into this mini truck scene, and I started, looking through the magazines, and boom, there's an ad for your business, and I ended up calling it, bought some parts, and over the years, we may not talk a lot, but it's like we kind of exchange messages here and there. I've always respected what you've done, but we'll kind of get into some of that. First, I just want to kind of ask you, how's it going, man?
It's going great. Like, even though I'm not doing the truck business stuff anymore, I'm like, it just never stopped. I just traded one passion for another and been doing my artwork 24/7 ever since. My shop's from home now rather than so I don't have to leave and be gone 120 hours a week. So now if however much I decide to work, I can still stop and spend time with the family, in between. So life went from 100% stress to 0% stress doing what I do now.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to hear that, man, because that's where it's at. And speaking of life, man, why don't you just kind of tell the listeners maybe a little bit about yourself, maybe where you grew up, and who is Steve Nielsen?
I mean, there's so many different probably parts of it that I could start on and touch on, but I would say as far as the truck scene, if you want me to kind of talk about where I got started with it and where the bug got me, I was always super into anything creative, very artistic. I can remember even back in grade school or in kindergarten, I remember the teacher putting my drawings that I would do on the wall. So I was always had that creative drive. And I don't know, when I was about 13, there was my mom would take me to church every week, and there was these two guys that were right about high school age, and I was 13, a little bit younger, and they were building these Chevy Loves. This was 80, probably between 83 and 85 or something like that. I remember I couldn't wait till after church to go out and see the new mods that they'd done on their trucks. And we're talking these trucks should have been probably, we're in Northern California, so it's not like you're around car shows all the time to get shot for magazines, but these guys had trucks two brothers that should have probably been featured in trucking, and that was way before even mini trucking started. Mm-hmm. So one guy had a Chevy Love with a tilt bed, and it was all full custom. I mean, every single thing you could think of. The Alpine stereo back then, you got to have Alpine stereo in the 80s. So.
Oh yeah.
But anyhow, the tilt beds, one guy had a side tilt, one had a back tilt. The one guy had a graphics, the other guy was just clean metallic paint job. But that they used to take me. I was so obsessed with all the creativity that went into what they were doing. Is I just literally could not wait to see them the next week to see what they did. Mm-hmm. And when I was probably late 13, 14, before high school, still 7th, 8th grade or something, they offered to have me go to a couple car shows with them. And then I was I hit it off, and I was so into what they were doing. They took me to some cruises back then. The cruises were big,
wow.
Thick, you'd go to down Woodland and kind of between Sacramento and Northern California. People that are from California, it'd be kind of between Sacramento and Bay Area, San Francisco, kind of in the Woodland. There was this cruise that everybody knew about, and it was just thick. I'm talking hours and hours and hours long. Well, you probably remember Pigeon Forge, how thick It was back in Tennessee. It was kind of smaller version of that. I mean, eventually the neighbors and everybody got complaining, and they created ordinances, and the whole thing went away. But that's kind of got my bug going, I couldn't wait, after a year or two of hanging out with these guys and going to car shows with them and just watching what they were doing. I became this kind of opinion guy, hey, you should do this. Hey, you should do that.
Yeah, so giving them feedback.
Yeah, I was giving them my creative turn on it, and I became obsessed with reading all the custom magazines, and I was pretty young. I was way too young to drive, but I just remember being able to I was seeing what other people were doing, and then next time I talked to them, I'd be like, yeah, I saw this in the magazine. This would look cool on yours, and maybe you could do it this a little bit different. So I was actually didn't even realize, and in my mind, back then it was just another canvas. I'd been artistic into art my whole life. So to me, it was just another canvas, another way to take that and pour that creativity into. And these guys were just like loving it, because they're just like, yeah, that's a good idea, or yeah, no, I would never do that, costs too much or whatever. But it became like kind of like me and what I was known for when I was younger. And by the time I was like 15, 16, I had my driver's permit and I was driving, and other guys were going out drinking, or they would work their part-time jobs after high school and put all their money into like kegs and parties. And I was like, dude, I don't need to party. I don't need to put any of my money into, because they'd be broke like the following week.
Sure.
I go, every single dime I make, I'm like, I worked at McDonald's from the time I was 15, when I was actually legally wasn't even permitted to work, but my dad knew the owners, they were fishing buddies. So he's like, yeah, come down here and we'll put you to work. And I worked like from the time I was 15 to 16 at McDonald's, my first job. And like, I was like happy to make that $3.75 an hour, because every single dime was going, it was either a gas tank or it was going into like a new something for the truck.
Yeah, no, you're a mini trucker early on. So fast forward a few years, you kind of mentioned your learner's permit and then your license. When you get into high school, are you literally like the guy driving a mini truck, or like what's your first vehicle?
I wanted a Chevy Love because that's what they had, and that was my favorite in the 70s and 80s. My favorite body style was the Chevy Love because of that curve of the fender, the way it wrapped around the hood, and it looked a little bit more like the newer vehicles. Like it had a more of a modern look to it. It didn't have it so dated. To me, in my mind, that's what like attracted me to it. And plus, two of my buddies that gave me the bug had Chevy Loves, but I wanted a Chevy Love, but my dad actually, in fact, this kind of goes back to the McDonald's thing, he's like, yeah, I know you want a truck really bad. And my buddy, the owner of McDonald's, he has this Ford Courier. It's like a 76 Courier. It's lowered a couple inches already. And his son had a drug problem. He shipped him off to some kind of, the military or something to straighten him out. And the guy was like, so he had this truck sitting in his driveway. He wanted to sell it. And they made a deal like behind the scenes. If he sold it to my dad for like relatively cheap, like my dad's like, well, he needs a job. I ain't going to just buy it for him. And he's like, oh, I'll give him a job and he could pay it off. So that was the deal behind the scenes. I didn't even know I had a job. Like he came home and said, hey, I found a truck for you. And I was just like, no, it's not what I want, but yeah, it's like something to start with. And it had a V8. So that was what made it unique. It had a 302 in it, brand new, like literally just been completely built and brand new and everything. And so that was like my commitment to my dad and my parents was like, we'll buy this truck for you for $1,300, but you have to at least work for Ed down there at McDonald's until you pay us back. And it took me basically we came up with an amount that I had to pay him every month. So it took me exactly 1 year to pay off the truck to them. And I was still putting money into fixing it up in between.
Okay.
But, so that was that's what started it. And then my buddy in like high school that was like a couple years ahead of me, he was like the teacher's, like whatever you call it, teacher's pet in a way, like in high school in metal shop. And so my freshman year, we already had it all planned out. Like my freshman year, I come in, I was in there for like 15 minutes and saw my older buddies that had custom trucks and stuff. And he takes me straight over and gets me signed up in driver's training class when they used to do it at high school.
Yes.
And then he's all, okay, so, and it was like I was there like early before school started, and it was already like, I think like a year wait. So I couldn't even take the class for like a year. So I was driving like illegally for about a year, probably when I was 15 to 16 to go to work at McDonald's before I even got my license. But then he takes me straight over and he's like, we got to get your things all changed around, your credits or whatever your classes, so you can get metal class. And he was going to be like, kind of like, I was already best buddies. We lived in this, right next to each other. So he got me into metal class, and he's like, you're going to learn everything, in here, like about welding and working on your truck. And we were kind of doing Frenching his antenna on the side of the cab and doing mods and stuff like that. But our older buddies, they had the Chevy Loves, were already out of high school at this point.
Okay.
And the one that had the tilt bed, it was always something was happening, like the brackets were breaking on the hinges or some kind of thing, because we were talking like early 80s do-it-yourselfer stuff, right? So we'd bring it into class and get to work on this custom show truck and with the bed tilted up, and we got popular as the mini truck guys that worked on them, even like my first year in high school. Damn. So it was like all these things kind of led up to my like addiction and obsession with like the whole mini trucking thing and the whole I mean, at the same time, on the art side of it, I was drawing like for probably 2-3 years before I could even drive. I was like drawing like renderings and stuff and color pencil and stuff of graphics and different things, watching all the magazines. And when Mini Trucking finally came out, and I can't remember, kind
like
of
88,
bad, but
89. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So 88, 89, it was like my sophomore, junior year, and that's when Mini Trucking came out, and it was like, oh man, the new Bible, it's like,
Right.
like this is what we're talking about here, and like it just motivation every month.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, and many know, but it's like even when it first came out, it had like the first issue in '88, and then they were 4 times a year up until the early '90s, and it got to a point where I think it was 6, and then it moved to 12. There's a couple odd years in there, but to your point, I mean, that was what everybody was waiting on every month. And so my kind of question is, from there in high school until you graduate, at what point do you start saying, you know what, I can make a business out of this? Or were you working on people's vehicles, in and outside of high school for money?
I mean, when I was 13, like I knew I was gonna. My parents, like, they both worked like normal 9 to 5s,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just like, I don't know. No one ever gave me any business sense, but I had this kind of inclination, like I can make more money if I worked for myself. I don't know where that came from, because I didn't really have any mentors at that age.
Mm-hmm.
But remember at 13, I'm like, well, I need to start saving money to like, buy my truck. So
Yes.
I don't know how I'm going to do it, but like, let's see. Well, like I'll go around. I know how to mow a lawn. People need lawns mowed, so I started going around the block, knocking on doors, and before I know it, I had like, I think the first day I went around, I had 3 or 4 people that said, "Yeah, come mow my lawn for $5." And it was, like I'd carry the gas can and the thing, go around the block, come back with like $15. This is like, we're talking like 83-ish or something like that.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, I can make money. People pay me to do stuff. And from that point on, I knew I'd never want to really work for anybody else. That's why I like about, it only lasted probably till 96 before I actually went off on my own and never looked back. I've never worked for anybody else since. But yeah, that's kind of how the whole working thing started. I got way off track. What was the question?
No. So yeah. So you're kind of going down that path there. So when you graduate high school,
Oh, the truck thing. Yeah.
Well, at what point did you? Because kind of going back to Alter Images, right? So a lot of people know that you were the guy behind that, right? And you graduate from high school. From that point until Alter starts, how long of a period was that, and how did Alter Images start?
So between 1990, when I was out of high school, till about 93 or so, I was like just fixing up trucks and just kind of doing your average thing, just nothing out of the huge ordinary, just like doing it for fun and everything.
Lowering jobs, stuff like that.
Yeah, like, people would ask me to do stuff that they saw me do on my trucks, but it wasn't nothing crazy like airbags or nothing. I mean, the airbag thing didn't start up until like the mid 90s or something, when it really kind of started getting popularity. But so I would say about 93, I think I was working on a Toyota mini truck, like a 94, and I already had like a pretty full-blown little compact car, because I had a wife and a kid by then. And I was probably only like 21 maybe ish, about 21-ish. Had a wife and a kid already, because I got her pregnant right out of high school. That things happen.
Oh yeah.
But luckily she's the one. Still married. We're going up on 30 years next year. So, but yeah, like I got the car, got the little Civic, and that's when shortly after that, around that time, like Sport Compact Car magazine was coming out, and like all the mini truckers were evolving with families, so they had to put that mini trucking style into their cars. So I was already doing a car with graphics and body kit, and started to go to a lot of shows. And then I started missing the truck thing. So I started building a little Toyota. And I wanted that thing to be super, super clean, and wanted it to be the best thing I'd ever done. And really, it was like shaved out, 4-wheel drive fenders and bed and the whole thing. And that's actually how I met Bob Grant.
Oh, wow.
About 94. Yeah, about 94. I I was trying to find somebody, and I knew how to do metal work. I was already doing air shocks on this project because I'd read about it, and like I think Stage One guys from Stage One Customs back then were promoting air suspension, like in all their ads and mini trucking, and they were actually the first one to ever promote air suspension, way before AIM or any of those guys, came out with their big ads. But anyway, like I was doing all that stuff and doing little notches on the frame, stuff I read about in mini trucking, so I knew how to weld and fabricate from like my high school years, and I just kind of bought a little welder and I was doing all that stuff, but I didn't know anything about body work and that side of it, and warping sheet metal and all that. I was used to welding on heavier stuff. So here comes, insert Bob Grant, and then we both kind of had young families. He was married with one kid at the time and a little bit older than me, but we were pretty close, and I hired him to actually. I was doing side stuff at the time, like airbrushing back then, like airbrushing motocross helmets for side money to inject that money into my regular job paid for my family and living expenses. So my side work, I always had side jobs my whole life. I always created work for myself to pay for my hobbies. Okay. So I had airbrushing going on at that time, and I was airbrushing stuff, and I would put that money into the car or the truck or whatever I was working on, going to car shows. And I got a hold of somebody who said, hey, this guy Bob Grant, he knows how to paint. He paints all of his own cars. So I got a hold of him, and he, at the time, he was kind of more into like I just buy stuff and put fast body work on it and, rough it out and then throw a fast, quick paint job on it, and I flip it, and that's how I make my side money. That was his way of making side money. I said, well, I'm like, I want to do something that's like magazine level, like it's got to be perfect, got to be cherry, no. I don't want to see scratches in the paint or anything. I want it to be flawless. I said, can you help me do like the doors or whatever? Can you help me make a roll pan for the back like you do in the magazines and stuff like that? And he's like, yeah, I could do all that. And so that's kind of like I think we raise each other's level on that truck. Like I think about him coming in and me having that certain expectation, it raised his level of what he was capable of, but not used to doing. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, like I grew a ton from it because I didn't know. So he kind of basically showed me what he knew, and then I just kind of finished it from there after he got me to a certain stage on it. And then after I came out with that truck and it was all done and painted, and I actually had it painted by a professional shop, but it really set me to a whole nother level, and taking that to shows and getting starting to get it closer to the guys at Stage One Customs down in Southern California. I was driving the Civic with the graphics down to shows, and I ended up getting into Relaxed Atmosphere for a short time before. That was kind of before Negative Camber, but all those guys were in Stage One Customs, and there was a couple of Negative Camber guys associated with them. And I went down to a show, I think it was Havasu show, and stayed with the guys like Mike Shardis, stayed at his like little trailer up the river, had his race boat and stuff. And nice. That was when I met Sean Carlson. It was kind of crazy. Like I say, I never know what you're going to talk about when all these stories start popping.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I go down there. I meet at Mike Shardis' place. I don't know if all your listeners are, it's probably dating myself, but
no,
he was the big guy and all mini trucking, and he was right there with Courtney Howell. And anyway, all these guys, but Ruben Artiega was there. Sean Carlson was there. He passed on, since then, but he was like way above his years and the stuff he was building at like an early age. And we all stayed together, and these guys didn't know who I was. I just showed up like by the recommendation of one of the guys from Stage One, and they're like, hey, this guy wants to be in Relaxed. And they're like, oh yeah, they have him come to meet me at our house before we all drive out, and we'll drive out together to the river, at the river run. And I think it was Endless Summer back here in '94. And
damn, here's something funny real quick. We just posted, it was the 25th anniversary last weekend of Endless Summer 94. Crazy, man.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, literally. I ended up taking third. That was my first major show down there, like going to a Southern California show. That was my first major one, and hanging with all the Relaxed Atmosphere guys, and they gave me a sticker like right in the middle of the show, and I ended up taking third. But that was that was wild. I mean, I was going to shows before then. I actually started with another friend of mine. I started, don't want to go too sidetracked in the story, but I started Extreme Lows in '93.
Really? Damn.
I started Extreme Lows I'm in Oroville. I'm like just south of Chico, California. the Chico was like kind of where he kind of was the center point for it. And me and Brian Avey he's out of Nevada now. He was the guy that brought me up during the Hall of Fame thing last year.
Yes.
The Mini Truck Hall of Fame. He's the guy that like brought me up. That's why I had him bring me up, because he was like, he's known me since it all kind of got started. But so when we kind of hooked up, and he was like this about 20, 30 minutes past Chico the other way, we would meet in Chico. So that was like our center point, and we started Extreme Lows. I mean, I probably would have stayed with that club, but some bad people got mixed in, and it kind of just started giving us a really bad name. And it was easier for me and then being the family, and my wife was driving our car, grocery shopping and getting harassed by people. It was like, dude, like, I'm pulling the sticker off. I'm like, sorry. So I was kind of looking for a place, and at the time I'd already been talking to those guys down there at Stage 1 a lot, and Relaxed Atmosphere was like really well known in the magazine and well respected. So I was like, these guys are probably more in what my frame of mind is about building custom cars and not just hanging out and partying and getting into drugs and doing other bad stuff. Not saying that they all were, but there was some bad people that got into drugs, that got into the club that I had nothing to do with, and that kind of just gave us a bad name. Police were harassing us and everything. So, I mean, nothing against them. I mean, most of the guys were like solid guys, but you kind of have to just distance yourself if it's out of your control.
Yeah, definitely. And congrats. I mean, we wanted to say this, but about 11 months ago, you were inducted into the Hall of Fame for Mini Truck Hall of Fame, class of 2018 as a builder. So, congrats. And kind of going back to Alter Images. So, right, you dabbled in some of your personal vehicles, and you built some cool stuff. But it seemed like when I originally saw an ad and I called you back in the late 90s, there was you were really building up this do I call it like a merchandise style business, right? You had Lexi and rear windows, you had stuff for airbag suspension and stuff. So talk a little bit about how that grew.
Well, I would say that one car show that I went to, and I drove down in '94 and met all the key players. Like in that one event and we literally, like, instead of staying at the campgrounds that year, we jumped in the boat and ran back up across the river and stayed in the little mobile that they had at Mike Shardis and all those other key players that were with the magazine. I don't know how that was just dumb luck, that I just happened to meet all those guys. And Lance Martz. Lance Martz wasn't even working at the magazine, I don't believe yet, but he was kind of like an up and coming photographer and like dragging on the coattails of Shardis and Courtney and all them guys. So that to me projected me to made my thinking like, boom, there's like a whole nother bigger world than I've ever thought possible. This is like a whole nother level that I could take, what I already love doing to. And so fast forward from there, staying in touch and then going, like, I would say, build my own stuff. In about 96, I'd already bagged a bunch of trucks on the side just out of my driveway.
Okay.
And I about by 96, and this was like, so a year and a half, 2 years down the road, and all the guys in Southern California, like Stage 1 was the main shop doing it, they were kind of referring people to me up this far. We'll sell you the parts and go to that guy, he can install it for you. Because like no one in Northern California was known at all. I didn't know if there was other people doing it yet at the point where I was, but I think I was either the first or one of the first. And I mean, even people from Oregon and all Seattle above California were all coming down to me because nobody else up there, at least they told me that nobody else was up there was doing it. So that's kind of like, it just kind of one little thing led to another. And I was doing that on the side already. And so knowing Mike, or not Mike, but Mike, there's other Mikes that came down later from the magazine. Right. Going back, Lance Martz. Oh, wait, Mike Shardis. That's what I was thinking. Them and Sean Carlson and all those. And they're just like kind of encouraging me, like, yeah, do what you love, and you're already building cool stuff. Might as well charge people and stuff. So at that point, I was kind of at a point where I worked at the school district, local school district, doing groundskeeping and maintenance, and kind of hated it, but I did it because like I had a family and stuff and needed to be able to pay bills and have insurance and everything. Mm-hmm. I got hurt and I needed something else to do because like I was always like pulling muscles and getting injured. And I was like in my early 20s, but I was like the stuff all the old guys would always put the heavy stuff on me. So I was always constantly getting hurt. And And so like all the other guys I worked with had been there 15, 20 years and we're all like 50s, 60s, you know, nearly retired. And so they were all like, make the young guy do it. You know, he got a good back. So after about from 90 to 96, and like, I was just, you know, pretty tore up. I had a lot of injuries. I was always going to like chiropractors and all that kind of stuff. They asked me, they're like, you know, the insurance company, because there was like where I was out of work for like probably a few months, like where they literally doctors took me out of work and said, you know, you need to let this heal, like tore some ligaments or something from lifting wrong or something. And they're like, you know, what else do you think, what are you passionate about? What would you do? And I was like, well, it's always been a dream of mine to just build custom trucks my whole life. Like so it's always been that dream, you know, that and art, you know, creating art. But at the point, like I wasn't thinking of art as a career. It was more like just something I liked creating and doing, drawing and whatever, and painting. But I was like, I could see actually creating parts off of these installs that I had done. I could see, like, envision like that people would buy those because I was actually personally perfecting them on my own vehicles and then installing them on other people's. And I'm thinking, I don't know who else is doing that. Most people that I could tell would just come up with like one part and then duplicate that, and it would never get kind of, you know, refined or perfected. Maybe some shops did, but like at this point, like I think AIM Industry started coming out, you know, and like Chassis Tech, whatever, the same company, and everything was real generic, and a lot of people knew that. So I knew that stuff like from people I would talk to and stuff. We're just like, that's not really that great of stuff. It's like things you'd have to modify it to get it to work and everything. And I thought I could kind of add something, make something better, is basically, you know, not to make the other companies like at all. I'm not trying to downplay them. I'm just saying I saw a need to make something better. And so I thought, well, yeah, I could do that because I had that creative aspect to me and I had that drive and that passion if I put my mind into it to perfect stuff. So I just decided, you know, like I told when I was out on a workman's comp thing with the school district, I was like, they had me talk to a guy that rehabilitates you or whatever to another job. I said, well, this might sound crazy, but like I can't do a desk job. It'd drive me crazy. And like, you know, I said I could kind of go at my own pace if I worked for myself. I go, since I was 13, I've been creating jobs for myself to come up with extra money. I said I could, and you know, I was never into drugs, never drinking, none of that kind of stuff, but actual physical jobs that I would create, you know, to do like mowing lawns to start out with, and then whatever, you know, landscaping was an easy thing to fall into because like everybody needs something done if you talk to them. But so anyway, I told this career guy that was like a business guy, I came in and immediately, like after listening to me, you know, for like 10 minutes talking about mini trucks and like how the passion of creating it and all this stuff, he could tell that I had a passion. He said, dude, he's all, I don't know anything about what you're talking about, but I know passion. And he's like, I've had many successful businesses. He's like, I'm retired from it and I just like mentoring people. And he's all, it's very rare to come across anybody in what I'm doing to rehabilitate people for work, to find somebody that actually has a passion like you do for what you're suggesting. Nice. He's like, if you're interested, he's like, I will mentor you the best I can throughout this process. It was like a 6-week process of kind of helping me create a business plan and how to go through all the little things and stuff. And at the time also, Bob Grant was actually working at a company called Air Filtration, building paint booths. He worked there. He's the head guy in one department building all the sheet metal stuff. And he'd done little roll pans. Like, in fact, their roller was so small, he had to build roll pans out of 2 halves and weld it together. That was how he started, kind of like on a side note. But so I was like, hey, dude, like I'm going to do, and we were pretty good friends. We were helping each other build our trucks, and he'd have projects and I'd have projects. We'd always help each other and kind of trade the favors. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do a business or something, you know, because like I can't go back to like doing like a regular working for somebody else. And I got too many like back injuries and shoulder injuries from lifting stuff that like if I'm stuck doing the same thing all the time, it's like I just can't picture myself. I go, I got to do what I'm passionate about, what I love doing. And still, I don't even know where that came from. Like the last stuff I'm telling you probably stems from like a lot of, I mean, you would hear like successful books and mentors and stuff talking that way, but like I don't know where I got it because I didn't have any influences, business on the business side in my life and my family. But that's just, it was always ingrained in me or something. But from somewhere. But
yeah, no, I
anyhow,
get it.
Yeah.
And
it took off. It took off. Yeah. I just, they basically got behind me and they gave me a small little budget. I want to say it was maybe 20 grand or something, you know. I don't like to throw out numbers all the time because people judge you, but I'm a kind of an open book when I talk about stuff. But anyway, I think they gave me like maybe 20 grand or less of a budget, because it was like either like we either put this much money into send you to some kind of specialized course class or whatever to retrain you, or you could do this, like what you're saying. And if you want to do this, you got to write off like basically if it fails on you, which most businesses fail, but if you want to do this, like, well, the guy was behind me because he knew I was passionate about it, and he's all, but this is like a budget. He's all, after you meet with me and we deduct all the meetings from me and this and that, he's like, you might have maybe 1,800 or 18,000 or so left. And so I was thinking, okay, ads for the magazine, and I was starting to reach out to all the magazines because like and this is, like I hadn't thought about this stuff before, so I'm glad I'm kind of explaining it to you. But
oh yeah,
he kind of made me think like, okay, you have to have a business plan, because I probably would have failed big time like right off the get go if I wouldn't have had this kind of a little bit of it direction. But he told me, he's like, you got to go out and like see who your buyers are. You got to see, like, you got to know like what the numbers are, this and that. And he kind of gave me an outline of stuff to fill out, and every week I'd go back and meet with him. And I got so obsessed with like wanting to learn the business side of it at that point, and meeting with this guy that was like really successful and be able to give me answers that I didn't even know that I had questions for before. And it just kind of like that was kind of it. And then so I had enough money to pay for maybe 6 months worth of ads, a little black and white quarter page ad in mini trucking, went and freehanded drawn out like a Toyota mini body dropped and stuff, and it was just a line art, and then put airbags and roll pans and a few other things in there that I think that we came up with, notches, C notches and stuff like that. And had the first ad, and within, I want to say like the first week, I did like more sales than I ever dreamed of.
Anticipated,
and then like within 6 months. But here's the thing, how we're talking right now? We've never really had a phone call before. This is how I talk to every customer for 20 years.
Right.
So that's kind of to give you an idea. Some people might say, oh, dude, that guy was way too long-winded. But I just felt like everybody was into the same thing I was in, and I was into it because I loved it. I could have been more business, but I took the more like I'm into this because I love doing it kind of thing, and I love just having friends in the whole grand scheme of things. So yeah,
and that
was probably my hardest part.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing, because we have a friend that has a really successful business, and he's very similar, where some people like it, some people don't, but he only does business through email. And some people are like, oh, well, I want to be able to just call and stuff. And it's like, well, if you talk to every customer for a super long time, you're kind of losing business because you got a lot of other work to do, And when you're already working 10, 12, however many hours a day, it's tough. So I totally get it. Now, do you remember, and I don't know if you did this for everyone, but I remember I bought like airbag stuff. It was bags, it was airline, it was notches, it was all kinds of different stuff, right? But you had included a VHS tape, and it was a bunch of, and I still have it, and yes, I still got to get it converted, but it was a VHS tape that you had sent, and I swear, like, some of the coverage was Truck Jamboree, when there was like a yellow full-size Budnick truck that had the Hideaway headlights on it with the billet deals.
Yep.
There was so much coverage on there. There was stuff at your house. I think Bob was working on. It was right after the accident and the pickup, right? That became.
No, like
yeah.
So late
late
96. I started in 96, Alter Images. Late 96, I had so much stuff going on, and like neighbors were like calling the cops on me for like working all hours of the night, working on bagging trucks, out there body dropping trucks right in my driveway or something. There's houses on both sides.
Yeah,
of
I remember. Yeah.
And I was out there like cutting through a floor doing my first body drop in the sheet metal, whoa, 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 whoa. And I had neighbors out there like literally shaking the fence, like cussing at me, like veins popping out of their neck, like wanting to kill me. And I was just like, my wife's like, you got to get like another place to do this stuff. And money was coming in, and so like orders were coming in so consistently that and everything just kept growing that I was like, all right. So I started looking for a shop and found one for $600 a month at the time in a little 4,000 square foot shop. That was my first one. And then I secured that, and it wasn't even, shoot, it wasn't even like, I didn't even know if I actually had an ad out in the magazine yet, to be honest, when I was doing all these taking photos and doing video and stuff like that. Me and Bob Grant and a couple of friends of mine, we all ran up to Crescent City at the Below Sea Level show back then. That was like a big show, and like it was kind of like right below Oregon and way high Northern California,
right.
like a few miles from like Oregon border. And we worked all night on our stuff and then drove up there overnight. And Bob Grant and I was riding with a buddy of mine. So and he actually slept a little bit at the show. He climbed up underneath some guy's like tonneau cover and fell asleep for like 8 hours or something. So he was okay. But he's like, "Hey, dude, nice truck." He's like, "Man, think I could climb up under there and go to sleep?" And he's like, "Guy's like, yeah, whatever." And so you just met the guy, and he was like, but luckily because like he didn't crash, but Bob and myself and remember TCM, Tyler Edwards, they had Skinned Alive.
Yeah, I remember vaguely the name.
Well, he worked for Bob at the time. Later, he worked for me, and then later he went and started his own business.
Okay.
But the Skinned Alive Toyota started at Bob's shop, went to my shop, and then later got finished under Tyler's own shop. But he was like maybe 15 or 16 when he worked for Bob, and he was in the passenger seat of the truck called Blazoda or whatever he called it, like the black.
Oh yeah.
It was red, then it was black, but it was like a older 80s Toyota, like 82 or 83 or something that had like a Blazer roof on it. But before that, when it was just a little body dropped 82, 83 Toyota, we were almost home and we were on a straightaway, and those guys were jumping. We were pulling over every 15 minutes. Either one of them had slept for 3 days. I was like kind of sleeping in the passenger seat of the car. And, well, we left on a Friday and we were coming home Sunday evening. It was almost dark or something. And, we were like maybe 20 minutes from home. And, Bob like just switched like 10 minutes beforehand. And I guess he literally fell asleep and one hand just stuck on the wheel. The other hand like kind of slipped out, and he just like skyrocketed off the road and through a guardrail, split the guardrail up, and then went right into like a covert, a ditch. Luckily, it stopped right before the little river or the creek or whatever. But he was like, from the street level, you could barely see the roof of the truck. It just like got airborne.
Yeah, they're lucky they weren't killed, dude.
Seats weren't bolted down. I always told him, I go, you know why you're alive? Because I did all the welding on that body drop.
Dude, insane. So here's the crazy thing.
When we did that body drop, in fact, that body drop, I want to say we did that body drop. I could be wrong, but I remember we did it in 24 hours. We did the whole entire body drop. We had a bunch of guys working on it. Bob was cutting pieces and giving them to me, making patterns and giving them to me, and I was like sticking them down, tacking them, and then welding them up. So my job was to do all the welding while those guys were feeding me and making pieces and stuff in Bob's shop. And I don't know for sure, but I want to say it could have been before that show. It was before a show because I know we did it in 24 hours. But anyway, it was welded solid. And I want to say that if I hadn't been there, it might have only been tack welded together. It could have been worse.
Holy shit. So here's the crazy thing. I remember the video, watching it, and so all that happens, and thank God no one was hurt or killed or, badly injured. And then
you saw it in the video, and it was in an empty shop in the back of my shop.
Right. So then I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, well, this thing's going to the scrapper, and no disrespect, but I'm just going, okay, I mean, this thing is like wrecked. Yeah. Well, then you guys
That's where he came up with Twisted Metal.
Right, so you get it. It goes from that, right, because it was like kind of the Blazer deal. And I want to say it was blue primer, and I mean, it had the crazy bumper. I mean, it had so much work in it. Well, then you guys get it back, and you're like, all right, that's just the beginning, dude. I mean, that was insane to me.
Yeah. It sat at my shop for, I had a brand new shop. I hadn't even actually been working out of that shop yet. I literally just got the keys for it not long before that. I hadn't moved any equipment in there or nothing that I could remember anyway. I just had had a few projects, that I took down there to get them off of my personal property. I hadn't even started really working out of that shop yet, but we're like, yeah, I could take it to my shop. There's tons of space in there, and it just sat in the back of my shop for a long time. Later on, I mean, he'd have to tell you all the stuff he did to it, but he fixed it. I don't remember what was left in the truck, maybe the top of the cab and part of the back of the cab.
It's nuts. And
he dissected it all and made it back a real truck again. And then a little while down the road after he did that, he decided to chop off the top and get a blazer roof and made all the pieces to fit it to the body afterwards, and made the bed sides from scratch and the rear combo skin from scratch and all that stuff. But
dude, it's nuts.
Yeah,
man. And it's cool.
That's why you saw it sitting in that shop, because that was the first Alter Images shop, but we hadn't even I hadn't actually started working out of it yet. That was like just a blank kind of a 4,000 square foot open shop, and I was like, yeah, I got the key. We could like have the guy, the tow truck drag it down there, but yeah, that's these crazy stories when you start talking about all that stuff.
And what's nuts is I think he even, Bob had posted recently on Facebook or Instagram and said something about the truck, and it was like, dude, like that truck is still like going to shows, I mean, it's on the cover of a magazine or Mini Truckin', and so it's just nuts. And we'll have to have Bob on at some point to talk a little bit more about it, but I always remember that. And I used to think this was nuts, man. So I'm watching the VHS, and you guys are going some road trip, and I'm like, I don't know, this VHS in my head seems like it's like 10 hours long, and I know it can't be, right? Because VHS is for like 2 or 3 hours.
It might be.
Right. So
I mean, not to cut you off, but just to give you kind of a tidbit, I used to just record everything because I knew that I could like use that later to kind of refer to or show people how we did stuff. Mm-hmm. So I would record everything, non-edited, just like 8-track, or not 8-track, but 8 millimeters video. And then I would save them all. And then, like, while I was working on stuff, and I finally hired somebody to be in the office so I could be out in the shop working at a certain point, what I started doing was I would just, like, play those videos all day long every day, 8 hours a day, and I would hit record and record them while I was playing them. So if anybody came by the shop, there was, like, install videos or car shows or whatever. Right. And so when I got done recording them, I just started mailing them out to good customers, and the ones that like were just like first time customers, we'd tell them about it and we'd sell it to them. And it was just unedited,
you were bootlegging your own shit. I loved it. So there was a day where you guys, you're like, you get in the trucks, you're like, oh, we're driving 8 hours up to this place, and you guys go up, and I forget if it was Mini Truck Dismantlers, but you go there and you get like a 4Runner, like a cab.
Yeah.
And they got the forklift, and they're bringing it down, and I think it was raining that day, and this. And I was a young cat, dude, right out of high school, getting a Mini Truck, and I'm going, dude, these guys in California are like going to pick up cabs that they're going to build frames and do all this crazy shit. And I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to lower my truck, But I always like was just blown away by the passion that you guys had, and the fact that you're driving all this way, almost like before people were really taking, cabs off and building full frames and stuff like that. You were kind of already thinking in that way, almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that 4Runner it was pouring down raining that day. I remember heading down. There's this place in Sacramento in Northern California, just east of Sacramento, called Rancho Cordova. And it was, they have a street called Recycle Boulevard. And all it is like that street, and then all the surrounding streets are nothing. It's like its own town. It's almost like its own town of nothing but wrecking yards. You got Toyota, you got Mazda, you got Porsche, you got Audi, you got Nissan, you got all these major ones. So all the insurance companies all send their stuff there. Like, when they get wrecked and totaled out, that's where all the vehicles are going. On the way down there, it was like a monsoon, like just pouring on the freeway. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to suck, like getting this thing loaded and tied down and everything by the time we get there. And I remember like on the way there, I saw 2 4Runners wrecked on the way going down there. And I told them when I walked in, I go, hey, I saw a couple new trucks probably be here. And like, sure enough, one of them was actually the tow truck was bringing it in while we were there. Like when I saw on the freeway, totaled.
Nuts.
But
yeah. So I have
here's another crazy side story.
Yeah, I have those.
You want to?
Yeah.
I told you I got a million side stories.
Yeah, man.
That 4Runner, when we got back, it still had the frame connected to it. They just loaded it up. It was smashed in the front. So we get it to the shop. I had no forklift, and I called Bob and his guys because he had a shop like across town. And I go, hey, Bob, I got the 4Runner here, and I'm trying to get a hold of him, and nobody's answering. And I'm like, hey, and that was like a major thing in his kind of like a major story. I don't know if he ever talked about it much or what, but he was working on a Mazda or Miata or something, doing some work for Steve at Fender Bender. We were like kind of in business with Fender Bender for a little bit. Like I was doing some stuff, Bob was doing all the sheet metal stuff for him, and he was working on a project car for Steve at Fender Bender, and apparently one of them didn't pay attention to the gas lines. And it was dripping like all over the thing, and it had cardboard down.
Shit.
Well, the cardboard got soaked, and I think it was Bob and Tyler Edwards, the Skinned Alive guy, Tyler. And so I'm trying to get a hold of him, and this is 1998, and we're sitting there with like a bunch of guys ready to like lift this cab, this 4Runner cab, on a four-wheel drive frame off of this trailer. And we couldn't get a hold of him, and he was like supposed to run down and help us. And then later we found out that he ended up he was in the emergency with his skin like all melted off because I guess the whole thing started to go up in flames, and he took a piece of cardboard that he saw just sitting off to the side and went to jump on top of the flame to put it out, and then the cardboard was soaked in gasoline that he didn't know about, that one of his guys had put off to the side or something or other. But whatever happened, like, so the flames literally like woo, came up on him, and I guess he ran outside. The whole shop was full of smoke, and I think they put the fire out, but he was like, I just remember, I think I talked to Tyler or something later, and he said, yeah, I was like, sorry, we couldn't come help you take the 4Runner. I had to take Bob to emergency.
Holy shit.
That was another major story I totally always forgot about. But
yeah.
I mean, if you ever talk to Bob, he'll probably tell you like all the details on his side of it. But that was like basically whenever I think about the 4Runner, and when I brought it back to pick it up, it always recall that story when he did that. That was kind of like a major setback for him, because like being so hurt and had his hands all wrapped up and hard to work sheet metal when your hands are wrapped up in gauze. But
yeah, dude, I never heard that. Now, let me ask you this: in terms of trucks, I don't know why this always sticks in my head, but at like Nopi 2000, we go there, and there's a guy that has this green S10, full graphics, like full blown show truck, and he's driving in. And we're like, damn, like this truck isn't just bagged and body dropped. I mean, this thing is like full blown. And I want to say when we spoke with him, we were like, man, where did this truck come from? And he said that, now this is what he told us from my memory, that Alter Images built him this truck and he just got it back. And we're like, dude, you're like in Atlanta, Georgia. Like Alter Images is NorCal, right? Because we know at that time, right, all about your shop. And but is that a truck that you guys built, or do you remember any story with that, or was that guy just blowing
Is it newer? Was it a step side?
It was.
Okay, so that guy, when he brought that to me, he lived in Rochester, New York.
Yeah, that's right, because I think he had a New York plate on it.
I think his name was Dan something. I can't think of the last name, like started with an R or something, I think. But yeah, he was a painter, worked at a body shop. He drove it all the way across the United States and had us bag and body drop it. And he picked it up, drove all the way out, picked it up, and drove it back, and kind of lost touch with him after that to a certain extent, I think, because he was just busy building it. But I think we might have sent him like a rear skin and some stuff for the back of it. But he repainted it. I think that at the time, that Beetle green, that like VW, new VW.
Yep.
Kind of a weird green, and then later after that, he put some purple chameleon graphics or some kind of stuff on it.
Yeah, it looked really good. Like I think it's a truck that could still come out today, change up the wheels, biggity boom. I mean,
in fact, it was in a DuPont. I was at the paint shop one time at a local paint supplier that sold DuPont, and I was looking through this, the best, whatever, like vehicles for the year before. And I was flipping through, and his truck was in there with like the new paint job on it, and it was all DuPont sponsored paint or something. And I was like, "Hey, I did a bunch of work on that truck."
Yeah, I got the pictures right here, and it's just amazing. Like what's crazy, even in the early 2000s, that someone could be like, "Hey, yeah, Alter Images," and although we didn't have social media back then, he obviously from the magazines found you, called you, took his truck from the clearly northeast, and then all the way over to you, which is insane.
Yeah.
Before we talk a little bit about Alter Ego, I wanted to hit on something that, dude, to me, still, like, I shared the photo maybe a year ago, and I couldn't believe how many views and impressions overall that the photo had, right? And I had hit you up, and I was like, yo, Steve, man, can you hook me up? I know you got a couple of these old photos. Dude, that double-decker trailer, that still is, like, killing the internet. Like, whose idea was that? Like, did you have that made? Like, what was the whole deal there?
So I remember seeing the guy that designed it. He had some partners. I can't even remember the guy's name because I only really dealt with him that one time. And I want to say it was around 1998, maybe getting closer to 99. And things were growing. Like, I mean, from the minute I got my shop in 96, every year we doubled in size and business and kept going and bigger, getting more people, getting more business, so and so. So things were growing. I felt comfortable, like, making an investment on that trailer because I'm thinking, like, we got, it'd be cool to take it, like, open, like a double stack open. Everybody else had doubles or maybe a double stack, but you'd pull in a vehicle and you'd have to have a hydraulic lift go up, and then you couldn't see what was in there. So it kind of, to me, I thought, rolling, the brand, like the rolling down the freeway to, like, we're going all these miles, like, why not are we advertising while we're heading to these shows? Like, we go to Southern California and Arizona, which are usually on average of 8 to 16-hour drives, like when we go to shows. So I was thinking, why aren't we advertising? So I saw this double stack trailer, but they'd only ever had one vehicle on it. And it usually, I think it had like a raced out pro streeted S10 Blazer, like orange with maybe some purple graphics. And a guy was taking it to shows, and it showed up in some mini trucking and trucking little pictures for show coverage. So I finally tracked down the guy that was in charge of the company, and he was going through some changes and things that they weren't selling that well, because it was such a expensive trailer and everything. And I was like, well, here's the thing, like, can you put two vehicles on it? Can you put one up in the air and drive it? Or because he was talking about just having something to go to the track with, to lift it up in the air and work on your vehicle. That was his whole point of building it. And I said, I got, all these show trucks with graphics and paint jobs and stuff on them. I want to be able to advertise while I'm driving. I want to pull into shows and everybody be like, oh, check out who's here, like, cause they recognize the vehicles. And so, he reinforced it and redesigned it. It was like $11,000 or something back then. It was crazy. But, I did a lease type of a loan, so it was pretty cheap, and it was $150 a month for a trailer like that on the payment. I was like, can't complain.
Yeah, it
was like
for its weight in gold because, dude, even to today, the few minis that I've seen on it, and I think it was yellow, and it just was like, I mean, dude, if you pull up at a show today, I mean, it's like some Craig Elder shit, dude. You know what I mean? That was just like mind blowing.
Yeah, I thought it was cool, and I had a purpose because I just, like I said, it was all about building a brand, and we were kind of known really for, like, we kind of favored Toyotas. It was just our thing. There was a lot of them, and we got comfortable probably with it. Bob and I both, and with his shop and my shop, we were always taking Toyotas and doing like newer front ends or whatever, newer tail lights on them. That was like kind of the popular thing to do, to make it look like it came that way from the factory. So I wanted to show that off going down the freeway and rolling into shows and that whole thing. And I think it went over huge because it just, they always, they say the big thing in marketing is like, whether it's good or bad, at least they're talking. So
oh, yeah.
Most of it was all good, and so people were just like all hyped up on that. And it's all the hype of when people go online. Back then it was just kind of starting with MySpace and stuff. And then I think 2008, like it started, that was like later on, but like early on, it was like the mini truck forums. I think it was, everybody would share stuff. And yeah, it was that was like a big crowd pleaser. It really got people talking big time. And that thing was like cool. I ended up I towed the trailer back with a regular 1500 1 ton, like Chevy truck.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a work truck at the time. And I ran down and met the guy halfway from Arizona, like somewhere in the middle point, just below, I think on the Grapevine or something, actually, like going kind of before you get to Southern California. And met him halfway, and I towed it thing back. And that trailer was so dang heavy, I couldn't hardly tow it with empty. It was like, I want to say between 5,000 to 6,000 pounds, just the trailer.
Yeah, that's
So,
so you eventually wanted to get something, a little bit more.
a couple of weeks later, I didn't know I was going to do this, but a couple of weeks later, we figured out a way to shift some projects around and come up with a down payment, and then end up financing or leasing like a brand new double cab Lariat F350 dually, turbo dually or so, 2001 or something like that. But well, yeah, no, that was it. Yeah, it must have been more like closer to 2001 when we got that trailer. Now that I think about it, yeah, because that's when I got that truck, 2001. I was thinking it was like late 90s, but it was like closer to 2001 or early 2001.
Yeah.
In fact, early 2001, it was like the entire market was on fire. Everybody, every business we talked to, everybody was growing like light speed. 9/11 kind of flipped it on its head, but yeah, we were growing so fast. That's remember I got that trailer and I got that dually all almost back to back, and that created a presence, almost kind of like Extensive when they used to roll in. Everybody would be like, dude, out Extensive on the East Coast, and because they had just crazy stuff, and everybody was just like, dude, nobody has that kind of stuff. So it was fun. That was definitely the highlight of the entire probably time I was in the industry. Was probably the biggest financial time was probably before 9/11. Right in that year, we had probably were going to push like $1 million in sales that year, and after that, everything just kind of like was
collapsed.
I mean, we collapsed. Like all the companies were going out of business. All the huge companies that I sold to, I won't name names, but none of them paid me. Like all of them, like I'd say almost 50% of our money coming in were other big companies, like catalog companies, the ones that looked like their own catalog in all the truck magazines.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys were promoting our stuff, like half full page ads of our stuff in their magazines, and none of them like they just all like were worried about closing themselves, so they just like stopped paying everybody, and everything kind of fell like dominoes backwards. So
Damn.
that's kind of what happened pretty much with, I fought for about a year and a half, 2 years after 9/11 to try to recoup, and I fell so far behind with all the people that owed us money that after about a year and a half, into 2002, like literally December 2002, I was really close to actually getting a huge loan from the city to like pay back every single that I incurred from 9/11, and to buy the building that we actually moved in 9/11. We moved into a huge shop. Like it was like almost 3 times the size that we were in before, so we can expand. That's how good things were going, right? And everything just kind of fell backwards because of 9/11, and people. It wasn't just 9/11. It was everybody was afraid to spend money, so all the little shops, we supplied tons of little shops, and all those guys were either just disappearing, or we would send out remember back in the day of COD, send out stuff COD, and CODs were bouncing on us. Checks would like show up 2-3 weeks after we shipped the stuff, and it was like bouncing 500, 800, 1,000. And anyway, it was just like a nightmare. Stuck it out, got down to a skeleton crew. When 9/11 hit, I had like 17 employees. I was down to about 4 or 5, like probably within a couple months. Couldn't pay them, I had no money coming in to pay them, and I had all that debt, like from people that weren't paying us, that were on like a 60, 90 day or whatever. Well, they started out 30 day, end up 90 day. But anyway, that's kind of what happened. And I regrouped and got with a machine shop. A friend of mine that like owned he owned everything. It was kind of like he grew up in the machine shop business, like being a machinist and mechanic and everything. And he was actually doing a lot of my TIG welding at the time before 9/11 hit, and he was doing like all the 4 links we were building. He was doing all the TIG welding, and he was machining all the bars and the rod ends and everything from scratch. And so when things kind of got haywire, and like I had to pretty much tell him like, I can't afford to pay you to be the shop foreman anymore and be here. You're gonna have to go back to just doing your machine shop full time. And
Damn.
He told me he's all, if the worst thing happens, he's all, I own everything outright. I have no overhead. He's all, come to my shop, and if you have to down the road. And it took like I said, over a year before I decided to finally pull the plug. And a lawyer pretty much told me I was totaled. He's all, if you're a car, you're totaled. He's all, there's no way you'll ever grow out of this debt like that. He's all this money that people owe you that you'll never get. You've been trying for like since 9/11 to get that money, you'll never get it. If you hadn't got it by now, they've already kind of like turned their
Wrote
eye
you
to
off,
like,
basically. Yeah. So let me ask you this.
what I lost,
You kind of hinted at it, but is that when CanDo? Because it seems like you were tied in with that organization. That's what you're referring to, right? So a lot of people know CanDo, and it's ironic. We just had Jay Church on, and when he built his Tahoe, that eventually graced the cover of Shoe Trucks, he had the CanDo stickers in some of the photos that I took up at a show in North Florida. But so you guys were primarily selling like control arms and stuff like that with the business, was it?
Well, now that I was basically partnered up with a full-blown machinist, and he's like this super, super creative guy. He's like the guy that could figure anything out. Like, he literally grew up, he never had a regular job other than working for me as a shop foreman part-time. Like, I need to bring somebody in that I trusted, that it was a friend of a family. So when he said, hey, you close your shop and you need somewhere to land, you have all the knowledge in the world, but I know you won't have any money to fund anything. I have everything. All we have to do is sell the stuff and make it. So we got together, and like, I didn't really have a choice, like, I didn't know what else to do, and I still love doing truck stuff. So we came up with his last name was Cooper and mine was Nielsen. So the can came from Cooper and Nielsen, and we were trying to figure out what we could create, like a name, and it just like, he kind of came up with like, he's all, well, you keep saying we could do anything, so why is Cooper and Nielsen, why just call it CanDo? So that's kind of how that evolved, and that's how that name came out, and we just stuck with it. And technically, most people didn't know this, but like, for most of those years, it was all in his name, and I just ran it like it was my shop, because I was still going through the whole mess of alter images and everything. So he was behind the scenes, just did the machine work, and like, I end up, he probably on average like put in like maybe 4 hours of work, a day. I was putting in 16, because to me it was like, I had nothing else going on. I had to like pound the pavement and get it up and running. He had his whole other clientele. He's like, he'd been there. His dad started that shop in the 60s, so I had to create it. I had to create stuff. I was using eBay and whatever I could. So that's how CanDo started, was pretty much like, nobody knew anybody except for me, because he never got on the phone, and he was just, unless I mentioned his name about, talking to Jeff about, machining some parts so I get that done. But
yeah, he was kind of like almost like a financial backer at that point. Like you said earlier, it was like, hey, he says, hey, well, I've got all these machines and we can do all this stuff. And then like, we create this brand together, and you
he
run
had an existing business that was there since it was there when he grew up. Like, he worked at it for his dad. His dad passed away, everything was left to him, so he just inherited everything, and that's all he did, is just, and he just did local stuff. But he has a creative mind that really likes engineering and coming up with stuff. So when we put our heads together, like, I knew what I was talking to the people, and I knew what they wanted. I kind of knew what the market wanted. And we still had Bob Grant across the the way, 5 minutes from us, if we wanted to sell roll pans and skins, we could. I'm like, I don't want to deal with any of that stuff again, because for a while I was just doing it all in-house. But with Alter Images, we were doing it in-house for a while. But I was like, yeah, we could just get all that stuff from Bob, if we want to sell that stuff. But let's just focus on stuff I've never done before. Let's get super creative, and let's create some suspension stuff. Let's make bolt-on kits for all the trucks that nobody's doing anything for. Like S10s, everybody had stuff for S10s, and Chevy full sizes, everybody was doing stuff because it was the American stuff. Nobody's doing anything for the Mazdas and Nissans, the Toyotas, stuff like that. So we started out with making 4-links, and then I'd say 2006, 3 years later, we got tore apart the green Toyota, the Alter Ego, and created control arms off of that, used that as a jig. And then that one was like a huge hit. Like, I mean, I literally was selling tons of control arms after that. It was like, hardly put a dent in it. I mean, it was like 90% of everything we sold was control arms. All of a sudden, it was like almost too much stress for my buddy that was like not used to
the volume of like side work. Exactly. It was like, it's not
his house was down the street, like a block. His whole life, he was so relaxed. I mean, he just like walked to work from like a block down the street or whatever. He like walk down to his shop, open the doors, people would show up. He'd do jobs, and the end of the day, you just take off, walk back home, and it was like totally relaxed kind of thing. Not used to like the kind of stress and the pressure that comes along with like being super, super busy. And so all of a sudden here comes me with like, we're partnering, and I'm like, Jeff, we got to get this out. Got to get this out. Got to get this out. Like, I got $10,000 worth of orders this week off of eBay, like 4 links and A-arms. I need you to machine this, machine that, machine it. I'm like, I'll teach me how to use the lathe. Like, I'll help you out. Then teach me how to use the mill. I'll do that. Then like, teach me how to do this machine. And then like, after a while, I was like, He didn't have to do anything. I was doing it all. And I think it just stressed him out like too much. So that's where like in about late 2006, I just went and got my own shop and broke off from him and decided to do CanDo by myself.
Got it. Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense. And I wanted people to know that it's like, okay, there was Alter Images, and that it had a solid run there, a lot of stuff you did, and then of course CanDo was something that's also under your belt. Let me ask you this: you mentioned, and I mentioned it earlier too. Really, only a couple more questions. I want to talk about Alter Ego for just a moment, and then kind of talk. Have you discuss what you're doing nowadays and where people can find information? But with Alter Ego, that truck really was, I mean, just a top-notch, high-end mini truck. A lot of work was put into it. Years ago, it popped up on Modified, and then I want to say Fester's Garage maybe ended up with it. I forget if he has it now. But can you talk a little bit about that build? Because that was your personal vehicle, right?
Yeah, in 1998, I was looking for a shop truck, and I decided to go down to the Rancho Cordova, the Recycle Boulevard, hit Toyota up and see what they had, because they'd always get wrecked trucks in, and they would sell them for builders. They'd have a salvage title, but they'd sell them to builders. And I'm rolling in, and before I even got to the Toyota, I think it was called TAP for short, pretty much sold the mini truck, and people over they actually had like a mini trucking ad for a long time called TAP in the back of mini trucking. But anyway, we down there, and we're on our way in. I was rolling into the area, and I seen this 89 Toyota Extra Cab, like backed in. Thing was all purple and super cherry looking, except for the front was crunched in. I go, oh, look at that! Like I could totally see like building that thing, because I was always into Toyotas and stuff. So I ran in there and asked him, and I think I bought it for like $1,500 as is. Said some old lady got in an accident, and they probably paid nothing for it, like hardly anything, because the old lady, like, they probably paid $500 for it anyway. Said it just showed up that day, and like I gave him $1,500, took it back, called up fender bender, got the whole front end coming, put a newer style front end than the 89. I want to say maybe a 4Runner. Yeah, I had a 4Runner front end on it for a while. Mm-hmm. But had that thing like all going, put super tail lights in the roll pan, like the normal stuff, had a Lexan window in the back. I think that we did a tech article with Lance. He came up, Lance Martz from Mini Trucking at the time, and we did a tech article on that truck doing the Lexan window, and there's a picture of me kind of bending it, like showing that it's flexible or whatever. And did that and used that truck for a bunch of tech articles, I think, and that became kind of like just the parts runner. And then a guy that worked for me, he had other plans, and we did some trading, and he never took it out of my name, which was kind of worked out later because I got it back, but he started body dropping it and started doing some stuff to it, and it just sat inside my shop. I actually had a paint booth built because I wanted to start painting again. I hadn't painted like in years, like stopped airbrushing and all the stuff I used to do because I just was too busy doing the truck stuff, and I was really getting itching for doing that. And so I had a paint booth, and it was just sitting in there collecting dust, like doing nothing. Stuff was getting stored on it and everything. So I ended up trading them back out of it after the body drop was already started, and got it all kind of completed and finished. And there was one show I took it to with him when I would say it was in his name. And Courtney walked up to it, and he's like, whose truck is this? I'm like, it used to be mine. It's a guy that works for me. And I go, I'm probably getting it back though. And I think at the time, I want to say that, I'm trying to remember they didn't have no hood on it. That's what it was. It was like rough body drop. The sheet metal to work in the bed was like kind of tacked in and stuff, and like the same sheet metal that it had if you ever seen it, but it was like just tacked in, and like nothing was like finished or painted or nothing. And so he's like putting an NC logo on you, dude. and we had been talking like multiple times at this point. You know, I knew who he was and he knew who I was, but we'd never really hung out because we're different ends of the state. And that's kind of how I got negative camber too. Kind of evolved to that. But that truck, I took it back and started really getting into it and digging into it. And there's a guy named Doug Alves. He's out of Northern California. I can't remember where his shop is now, but I follow him. Do you follow him at all? He's painted tons of custom trucks that have been in magazines over the years.
You said it's Doug, D-O-U-G?
Yeah, Doug Alves.
And then, like O-W-L-S?
Yeah, A-L-V-E-S, Alves,
okay.
Doug Alves.
Yep, I'll peep
Yeah,
him.
and so he was doing all this custom paint, and he was he was actually one of the guys that did all those below sea level trucks, that club when they had all the graphics and stuff back then in the 90s. And I took it to him, and we always did trading and stuff because he was still doing all the paint work, and like I was doing like all the suspension stuff, so I never had time. And so yeah, just like I need you to paint this stuff, and I go, I don't even care. I don't even drive right now. Don't even have a motor in it. Just need a crazy paint job. Just these crazy, finish up the mods. We're gonna weld the fenders to the. I can't remember if the hood was welded to the fenders yet, but I know the cowling wasn't. And then I think he finished that up. He welded the cowling to the hood, so the whole front end was like one solid piece. And the only thing that wasn't welded in was the bumper. And then he didn't have time to do it, so we just left it off. But anyway, took it up there, and then he did all the body work, got it in primer, planned 3 days, a Friday through a Sunday. I went up there and I worked on it day and night. We slept maybe 2-3 hours a night, and worked on it just nonstop, taping, masking off graphics, airbrushing and stuff. And that was the first time I had actually painted and stuff. That was December of 2000. Left it there. He clear coated it, and then he said, yeah, I'm gonna wet sand it, and I'm gonna clear coat it again. So I'll just leave it here. And then about a month later, he brought it down, and I painted the bumper off the truck separate. The graphics or the airbrushing blended in, but I had to do that later. But that was kind of how that truck evolved. And the whole thing about that truck was I was planning to do a 2-page ad. This was, like I said, December of 2000, and I needed that truck done and needed pictures of it so I could build an ad around it. That's how it became the inside cover of Mini Truckin' for 2 years. All the products were around it. Everybody knew that we built trucks over the years with different. So that one had S10 tail lights in it, newer S10. Front end was like a 98 Tacoma, but it was an 89 Toyota. So that's kind of basically how that truck kind of came about. And it never even drove for years. The thing was just got trailered around to shows, and eventually I got to the point where I wasn't driving. I was thinking I should get it driving and get it kind of on the road and fix all the stuff that maybe wasn't done, like the suspension work and everything. And when I went to sell it in 2006 the first time, redid all the suspension in the back from the cab back, made it super nice and clean. And I think that was a tech article for Mini Truckin'. And then and redid the front, I believe, some of the suspension work. I think the air suspension, cut it all out and redid that and stuff. And anyway, got that thing all dialed in and sold it, got it running and got it working perfect. And ended up the guy was never had a mini truck, and he was tired of it after a short time. He was afraid to drive it. He lived in a community, he said, that was mostly lowriders, lowrider style lowriders, flakes and hydraulics and everything.
Yes. And
he's a Mexican guy, and he's driving this white guy's mini truck. He's the way he put it. So he's dude, I'm afraid. I got almost got jacked on the freeway. I was driving it to work one day, and guy pulled in front of me, and another guy in the back of me, and started slowing down in front of me. And luckily, it was almost coming to the end of the freeway where there was a turnoff, so I was able to get around him and got in traffic and got away. I thought for sure I was getting jacked, and then he said I was getting gas. And one time, and all these guys were rolling by, just giving him crap, prejudice type stuff, why are you driving a white boy's truck? We should just mess that truck up. And he was afraid to have it anymore, is what it came down to. And he asked me if I wanted it back, and I worked the deal out with him where I had another truck, full-size truck, and we swapped it out with some money and got the truck back. And it was already running at that point, so I was sweet, drove it, used it. It was my daily driver for maybe want to say about a year. I use it as a daily driver.
Wow.
It's pretty cool for not having that truck all those years and never nothing but a trailer queen, and then finally got to drive it for about a year, and then after that, and I just got too busy and wasn't going to shows. I was just working. That's when I branched off from my partner in 2006, 2007. Cleaned it all up one day, just sitting out. It's like kind of like a advertisement for when people would drive by my shop, and this guy up the street kept eyeballing it. He saw it one day, all super clean, and he's like, he couldn't resist. He had to come in and ask if I was selling it or something. And I threw a number out at him. I was like, 10 grand. He's like, all right. And I didn't think he would bite, I just figured it was like probably $10,000 paint job, easy, It's like you had to take it and have it, not counting shaved work and the fed and all the other stuff. And so anyway, he came back and like had 10,000 cash.
And you're like, damn. All right. So he called by bluff.
He's all, you probably didn't know. You probably had no idea, that I was serious. And I was like, I never thought I'd ever see you again. But
yeah. So
and then he had it and it didn't do anything. It got traded around. And people do that, when they don't have no attachment to a vehicle. It just keeps traded around. Some high school kid got it after him and drove it for a little while. And it wasn't meant to be a daily driver unless you knew what you had and was taking care of stuff and the air suspension, and this and that. And I don't know what, the guy had some little issues and stuff, and the guy ended up trading it off, and it got traded off. I could have got it back really cheap at one point, and I just wasn't in a position where I didn't have the extra money. And then it got traded around, and a couple people, then it finally went out of town, and then that went on modified after that. Then Fester had it for like a couple of years, and I think him and James, they did all the paint work. He started fixing it up and getting it like back on the road again. And Fester was going to use it as a daily. Then, he started off in vehicles so he could invest in other stuff, and he got rid of it last year.
Yeah.
Or maybe
I was going to say, it slipped my mind if he actually had it, but I'm glad you recall that.
It's on the East Coast now. I can't remember what state the guy said. The guy got a hold of me and he's like, yeah, I don't want nobody to know. Like, I don't want anybody to know, like, that I have it until it comes out. And when it comes out, it'll be like ready to be like featured in a magazine basically, or be like perfect again. So I haven't actually talked to the guy since we had that conversation, but he just wanted to know the history about it and talk about it and kind of just know what he had, he wanted to have some stories behind the whole truck and everything. So he said eventually he'll just show up one day and nobody will like know what the heck's going on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that, man. And, as we kind of wind it down, I did want to just give you a moment to hit on, you have this whole new venture. People can find more information about it. Did you want to just give a quick overview and then maybe let everyone know what your Instagram information is, Steve?
Yeah. Well, pretty much like I've always been, like I said, into art, creating art, whether I was drawing or designing stuff. And the truck was a major part of my life, truck stuff. And it just, I guess because of the industry and everything and the way it kind of changed a lot, I just didn't kind of feel like I had a whole lot to offer it anymore at one point. And I was like really nothing new anyway. And like, I was really kind of getting to the point where I wanted to be inspired again. And so I was doing my artwork on the side and I was having so much fun when I would do that in the evenings. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what, like a lot of stuff was going on. I had like not that you probably like want me to go into the whole story, but just so some of the people that remember back then when I shut down might wonder why. I actually had my oldest kid was going through like a lot of mental problems, like when, a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And I was kind of absent from working so much all those years, on nearly 20 years building the truck stuff, that I was kind of had this guilty, conscience about not really being there for my family. Mm-hmm. Even though I felt like I was providing for them, I was chasing my own dream of like wanting to build cool stuff and, all that. And so it kind of had a lot to play in it. The art stuff was like, oh, I could do this from home. I could have my own shop at home, like on a smaller scale. I could easily make enough money to pay my overhead. Just the stuff that happened to deal with the family and everything at the time. He was like in the hospital off and on, like tried to commit suicide a few times. And he was literally in the hospital, like right at the end there. Like we almost thought we were going to lose him a couple times. So like I literally just was like looking for any way to get out. I tried to sell it to Ultra Images to one guy and he burnt me, and he actually tried to steal some of the customers' vehicles. And we found out about it after the highway patrol came and asked me about it. Like, hey, this guy is trying to register these vehicles. And I'm like, what? I go, this guy was supposed to be buying my shop. He don't own these vehicles. These are customers' vehicles. So luckily the cop knew who I was, and I talked to him before, and came and told me the whole thing. So that we got through that. That guy stole a lot of stuff and burnt me and everything. And so the guy that works for me, he offered to buy me out. I'll finish all the vehicles that are in your shop. He's all, whatever you owe to whatever the installs are that are in your shop right now. He's all, I'll finish them. And he was doing all the installs anyway. So he offered to finish all the installs, and he paid me off just for what the equipment was worth. I just said, if you could do whatever you want to do with the business, just buy me out, on the equipment. So I sold him all my tooling and all the equipment. He got everything that went with the business as well. But anyway, so I was off and running, had a little bit of money to last me maybe a few months, and downsized, got out from the big house, got into a little house that my parents owned to rent from, and just downsized, got my life real simple, and decided, okay, I'm going to create a new passion. And after about a better part of a year of making that change and everything, and getting into getting my overhead to where it was next to nothing, then that's when I started just working on my art full time again. And there was zero stress. Went from being stressed about people yelling and screaming, wanting their stuff all the time, and never happy, because that we were so far behind, because the demand and everything of all the parts. And so that's kind of how it evolves. And that's why kind of there was part of it was because I needed to be there for the family and needed to be more a presence, because I was I was only home late at night. I'd leave before they woke up, and I'd come home at 10, 11 o'clock at night every night. So that whole change is why I did that, and got into my art and never looked back, and just put the same passion that I started the mini trucking thing with back in the 90s or 80s and 90s, and just put it all into creating art. And I didn't choose to pick butterflies. I build these big, elaborate custom commissions. Everything I do is commissioned, by the way. I rarely have time to build anything extra. So if you see me building stuff on Instagram or Facebook and posting pictures, I have a 3-4 year waiting list of people that want stuff. So I just work down the list. Almost nothing is ever built and then try to sell it. So that's kind of where I am now. I just like creating stuff. Get up in the morning and pop in a good book, an audio book of some kind of successful business guy to keep me keep the business side of my brain functioning and thinking straight. And we were talking before you started recording about Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk and Darren Hardy from Success Magazine. All those guys have always been kind of mentors in a way, even though I've never met them. But those guys feeding my knowledge and keeping my mindset. Even though it's art, you still have to think business wise. You got to keep it you got to treat it like a real business, So that's what I do. I just create anything that people ask me to do.
Yeah, definitely. And they could just search on Facebook or Instagram. It's Steve Nielsen, Nielsen art. And that's the easiest way to find you, right?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's Steve Nielsen Art. And on Facebook, it's also Steve Nielsen Art on my personal page. And then Steve Nielsen Artist, like a artist. Steve Nielsen Artist on my business page on Facebook.
Okay, cool.
So I think my normal Facebook page is maxed out. It's always got almost 5,000. That's the most that they'll let you put on there. But I'll delete some people that I don't know every once in a while that are old business contacts that I haven't talked to in 10 years or something. Just I'll see them post something. I'm I can delete that. And I got a list of maybe 1,000 friend requests built up that I'll just go through and see if there's anybody I talked to recently I could add, but for the most part, if they want to really just follow the work that I do, Instagram is really probably the best as far as just seeing the portfolio, because I do I still share stuff to Facebook, but Instagram is more just my portfolio. You can just scroll down it and see everything I've worked on, and everything I do, it's almost about the same exact thing that I did with the truck stuff. I document every step of it and I build it, and kind of, it basically builds your brand. People get to feel like they're part of the process. So it's fun, just doing what I've always done, just in a different subject and this different passion.
Yeah, definitely, man. And it's cool. We've talked for a while, and I've really wanted to get you on. And I know you're busy. You'll stay up and you'll work late. And if you guys get a chance, look at his art. or just Google, Steve Nielsen art. I mean, a lot of cool stuff that you do. And, with this episode, Mike and I talked about it earlier that, it's a milestone for us. 4 years ago we started, we're at 150. But it's kind of cool, Steve, to me that, 20 years, a little over 20 years ago, man, I got a chance to first know you. When I first talked on the phone with you, you said, hey, man, there's a guy out in Orlando area. He's building a crazy Isuzu. They're going to reshoot it. It's going to be on the cover of a magazine. I was like, I'm some young buck, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. Well, ironically enough, within a year or two, I hooked up with the homies and ended up, becoming a Severed Ties brother with them, Rob Scepter, and he would have been 50 years old last month. And you were the first one that was like, dude, no, he's building this killer truck. It was, Lance had it. It was going to be a Reader's Rise. Now they're going to feature it. And sure enough, he had the Lexian back window, and, he had forged a little bit of a relationship with you and bought parts. And all these years later, we're still trying to keep Rob's legacy alive. He's not with us anymore, but it's always cool that 20 years, man, we can still reminisce about the old days, can't we?
Heck yeah. Yeah, I remember Rob when he was like a teenager, like just getting his truck going before it ever, I don't know if it was even ever, he went through a couple different paint job schemes.
It did,
And he got featured, I think, both times. Like one of them was like a purple or a lavender color, then I can't remember the...
Yeah, so it was
May, green or something at one time?
Yeah, so it was May 99, it was featured, and then May 2000, it was on the cover, and you're right, it was like that purple and lavenderish colors. Yeah. I'm not the best with colors, but that's my description. And then it came back peach, and our friend Matt had painted it, and
that's right.
Had did all the work. But a lot of people, and I've tried to kind of keep this alive, and I know my buddies in the past, we talked a lot about it. Like, what's crazy to me is it was May 2000, and it was the first Severed Ties vehicle, truck, that was on the cover of a Mini Truckin' magazine from Severed Ties, Florida. And we always kind of took that as a real positive thing because Rob loved that truck. And the crazy thing, too, is a guy owns it now. His name, he goes by Nene. And he's a good dude, and he's kept up the truck. He added a topper to it. He made some changes. Some love the changes, some don't. It's the same color. But it's just cool that these trucks can kind of live on and other people can appreciate them. And, that's why we do the podcast, man, to like look back at the past, but also...
That's cool.
To kind of, get a feel for where we're going with the future. And, Mini Trucking's still alive, brother. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And, I mean, I appreciate you asking me to do this. I know it's been like, I don't know how many years, but I'm always going through like some kind of like a super busy spell or something. And like, it's just, or I'm heading out of town for one thing or this or that. Something's always going on every time you ever ask me to do it. So I apologize it's taking me so long.
No,
but
it's all good. Well, I told Mike the other day, I said, you know what? I'm hitting Steve up. We've had him on the list. We're going to get him for the 150, the milestone episode. And, we appreciate it, dude. We know your time is valuable. You got family time. You got, your clients and things like that. But, I'd encourage everyone to go out there, check out Steve Nielsen Art, as Steve mentioned, on Instagram. He's a good dude, a lot of knowledge. I mean, we could have made this a 5-hour podcast. And, if you think of some other things and you want to come back on, let's do it. But, Steve, we wish you all the success, and thanks for some of those suggestions on the books, man. I did make some notes earlier before we started.
Cool. Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. And yeah, here's one thing to throw out is like there's a lot of guys out there that still have CanDo parts and stuff, like control arms. And I get hit up, like no kidding, like at least once a week by somebody like, hey, didn't you make those CanDo control arms? Hey, can you answer this question for me? I bought them used. It didn't come with all the parts, or where do I get the bushing? So I still try to help those guys out. I mean, like, it doesn't technically benefit me any other way other than it still goes back to like that. I've always liked helping people and having that passion of, the whole seeing other people build stuff and grow. And so I always try to like help everybody out that gets a hold of me, even though it's not my business anymore or anything like that.
Right. Well, so that's cool of you, man.
If anybody hears this and happen to have parts and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, Jay Church, I think when he was on recently, he even gave CanDo a shout out because, he had a badass Tahoe and it ended up being on the cover, and boom, I've got the photos of it that I took where it had the CanDo sticker on it and stuff, so it's always kind of stood out to us. But, man, from the early days, some of the stories you told us into, after high school and Alter over to CanDo and then over to the Steve Nielsen Art, man, you've done a lot. And like I said, man, all I can say is, I wish you all the success, and thanks again 20 years ago making all those VHS tapes. One of these days I'm going to release some of those epic videos on YouTube, man, because I know people appreciate it.
That'd be cool. Yes. There's probably one of me and Bob doing our first, both of us did a suicide doors on a 90 or 87 Toyota extra cab.
I think it is on there. I think it is on there, dude. I'm not joking.
It was like a teal green, but then later it was black, but it had a camper shell on it and everything. And yeah, that was a fun one. We looked like babies, we were both like maybe 21 or 22 or something like that.
Yeah, dude, the good old days. But man, it's like I said, it's a pleasure. If you got any old photos, shoot them to me on Facebook Messenger. But I've got a few saved from our prior conversations. But just keep doing what you do, Steve. And again, thank you so much, brother.
Cool. I absolutely appreciate it.
Airhead Nation, we at you. Check him out, Steve Nielsen.
Yeah.
Creeping about the house with my mug on me. Lexus kinda clean, crease in my jeans. Ready to hit this, run everybody get with this. It's going down tonight, up in the town tonight. Rolling Vegas up Omega for the chronic sin. Rolex on my wrist because I produce hits. Got them groupies having fits when I'm riding past. Tank full of gas, pocket full of cash. Side shows going down tonight. Made a right on 73rd and purchased some act ride. Bounce back in, crack that hint. I'm worldwide like a fifth of gin. And plus I'm in it to win. I'm checking your chin. AK down 77, my cousins A. Deep in the block, them deep east legends. There ain't no need to be stepping, we flow nining. Got them all rewinding, now they all realizing. Low riding, high shine.
Keep it on the real. High side. If you're real with me, I'll be real with you. Yeah. 3 times crazy, got your mind.
Off the sound and you pounding, latchy lounging, trying to get lit. I'm supposed to meet my folks at the club. A cutie eye, trying to get kick sneak to hit his bud. What would you do for love? Or is it cause I'm that sick of lover that you love? That's when I pull to the right to put the strings to the test. When I look in the eye, she was surprised. It was 3 times in the flesh, like stain on my collar. As I took another swallow, told the trip to follow. This Flormatic scholar, riding hard in Helen, and forgot that they was trying. They wasn't no getaway, but now at the club, smooth selling with my EB's belly, freaking in all in the dough. Worked up, I swear she got her hands through my fro. Went to the bar to get some more. Crazy juice for sure. It be hot side when we ride and representing the O.
Keep it on the real. High side. Take a walk. If you're real with me, I'll be real with you. Yeah. 3 times crazy, got your mind realized.
Fresh out the club with a girl on the smelly, evident, ready to hit the hot tubs of the telly. Got my groove on, the twisted line blended right. Remy XO in my Lexo at the light 3D. Crazy till I die on my mind. Trick a nickel back, I need a 20 sack of that lime on time. With proper precision, a pimp living Kenneth Coles with my bankroll. Knee deep in my linen right beside 3 times. Putting it down for the 9-6. Bumping hoes down with my 6 or your sidekick. So ride this West Coast till you croak the best hoe that you know what's next though. Getting broke by the finest. 3 times in my mouth shining. Backstage down there carrying shades, crushed diamonds. I'm climbing to the top like Pac when I rhyme. Follow my path or get left fast from behind, cause we outside.
Keep it